Hey everybody. If you're anything like me, and I bet you are, you've likely experimented or toyed around with code editors your entire career. It's kind of what we do. And I don't know, isn't it funny how seemingly every single time each editor figures out one piece, but not the other? And it can sort of be disheartening or frustrating. So close, but not the right fit. However, I am so pleased and grateful to tell you that, I don't know, I think PHPStorm has solved this puzzle. And you know how I know? I know because I no longer find myself on a monthly basis searching the web for that new editor that will somehow magically upgrade my workflow. I've already found it. Game over. Whether it's debugging capabilities or integration with popular community tools like Prettier or PHP CS Fixer, or dynamic code snippets or multiple cursors or seamless testing or one-click refactoring or search anything or terminals or incredibly powerful Laravel support with the Laravel Idea plugin, it's all there. It ticks every single box. It blows my mind. And the icing on the cake here, which I can't usually say for traditional IDEs, but with PHPStorm, the new UI is gorgeous. All right, so if you want, you could set up a command center with a visual or an icon for every possible action you might need, or you could strip the UI to the bare metal. The choice is yours, and either way, it's going to look great. So, if I've piqued your interest, and I know I have, why don't you come along for a ride? Together, we will press install, and then, one lesson at a time, I will show you all of my favorite PHPStorm features. And there's a lot. All right, let's get going. Okay, let's get started. I hope you're excited. Now, of course, the first stop on our journey is the PHPStorm website, jetbrains.com/PHPStorm. And if you're working along, and I hope you are, go ahead and click download now and notice that there is a free 30-day trial. Okay, so we're all set here. We can download it. And do note, if you're on a Mac, if you're on one of the new M1 or M2 Macs, be sure to choose Apple Silicon. Otherwise, Intel. Otherwise, you can use the JetBrains Toolbox app, which is what I personally use. Either one will do the trick though. Hit download and you're off to the races. Once that download completes, open PHPStorm and you'll see something like this. Okay, and right off the bat, I see a little panel down here at the bottom. Meet the new UI. PHPStorm got a modern new design with reduced visual complexity, fewer distractions, and the same power. And as it turns out, this will soon be the default. So I will go ahead and enable it. And we'll give that a restart, and we're off to the races. Cool. So now, of course, I could create a brand new project. However, behind the scenes, I installed a fresh copy of Laravel 10 through Composer. So I will open that now. Okay, so let's see what we get out of the box. I will close README, open up my project. Here's my Laravel folder. And why don't we go into, how about something like app, models, user? And this is what we get. And you know what? To be honest, I think it looks pretty good out of the box. It looks great, in fact. But of course, a key thing to understand with PHPStorm is that flexibility and configurability are of the highest priority. So if you don't like something, remove it. If you don't want to see something, hide it. All of this is configurable to your needs. Okay, so of course, in this case, I think the sidebar is a bit too wide, so I will reduce that. And then let's go into PHPStorm settings, or I can hit Command, on a Mac. And at this point, let's go ahead and configure your preferred font and size and line height. So actually, as it turns out, JetBrains Mono is the default, and I really like it. But if you prefer something like Minlow or Plex Mono, any of these, go with what you like. All right, next, I'm going to enable ligatures, which will give me fancy arrows and things like that. And I will hit Apply. Next, we can go to Color Scheme. And you can play around with this all you want. So maybe you prefer Cobalt. Let's have a look. And this is what we get. And that's an option if you prefer. But I think dark looks pretty good. Or if you want something unique, you can install a plugin. So let's do that now. I will close Editor, open up Plugins, and you'll see this is divided into two panels. a marketplace, and then all of the plugins or extensions that you currently have installed. All right, so for example, maybe you like a theme called Carbon. Let's search for it. And there we go. We hit install. Or maybe you prefer a theme called Nord, which is one that I use a lot. Let's install that as well. Okay, and instantly it updates behind the scenes. And now, yeah, maybe you prefer this, maybe you like what we had before. It's a preference thing. So now let's wrap up by making just a few more visual tweaks that, I don't know, that cater to my own quirks and preferences, and you may disagree. So why don't you come along for the ride and see what you think. First up, these breadcrumbs at the bottom, they look nice, but I don't reference them too often, so I'd prefer to hide that. Let's right-click, Appearance, Breadcrumbs, and choose Don't Show. And now it's gone. Next, the same is true for this big status bar at the bottom. It's useful and it can be helpful, but I'm not sure I need to see these things every time I open my editor. I like that I can click here to quickly browse around my project, but I already have a project view to the left, and most of the time I will use Command P to get around from file to file. So why don't we hide that as well? Now in this case, I don't think I can right-click. However, if I go up to my menu, let's go to View, Appearance, and down here, let's deselect the status bar. All right. Okay, moving on. Next, the sidebar here, or the project view, incredibly useful. I will reference it all the time, but it's also something that I would prefer to open and close as needed. So yeah, I can click here to hide the sidebar, or on a Mac, I can hit Command 1 to toggle it, as you see here. And yeah, to be honest, all of this stuff sort of comes down to your own personality. So you can play around with this and tweak it as needed. For example, maybe you want to go back to Appearance and you don't want any tool window bars. Well, you can deselect those and notice those to the left and the right are now gone. Or maybe you prefer them. I'll bring them back for now. All right, what else? How about this toolbar here at the top? Very useful, but it's also possible that you may find you don't reach for it very much. So as with everything in PHPStorm, we can customize it. Okay, so yeah, if you don't want to handle version control from that toolbar, select it, choose minus, and then hit OK. And now, yeah, that version control panel or dropdown is gone. Maybe we can do the same thing for the project widget. Cool. And honestly, to my eyes, that looks really good. Okay, so now we can do the exact same thing for the right toolbar. And yeah, just tweak this or pin to it however best fits your own projects. So for example, when it comes to debugging and Xdebug support, I found that in the Laravel community, it's much more popular to reach for things like simple DD functions or even tools like Ray. So if that's you, yeah, go ahead and hide these. You don't need to see them. Maybe we don't need the Code With Me toolbar. Maybe the project settings, you'll just use a shortcut for that. Maybe search everywhere, you will use a key binding for that. Again, this all comes down to personality and your own quirks. And yeah, to fast forward a bit, for me, I'd probably get rid of almost everything except maybe a run button, which can be helpful. And this is what we see. So yeah, think about it. That maybe took a few minutes or so, and already we have something that is super attractive. But here's the cool thing. Even if we didn't make any of these tweaks, and instead we just stuck with what the new UI provides out of the box, that also looks really good. So you can't go wrong here, is my point. Okay, so now, this final minute, I want to address the super minimalists among you, and I know you're there. If you're the type that wants everything as bare bones as humanly possible, of course, you can do so, and I'll show you how. Let's go back into Settings, and I'm going to look for Tab Placement. All right, here we go. So where do you want your tabs to go? Well, why don't we hide them entirely? Again, this is only for the super minimalists among you. Most of you won't want to do this. All right, and now the tabs are gone. Okay, next, if we're taking this to the limits, let's once again go and hide the tool window bars. Okay, next, if you've gone this far, maybe you don't even want those line numbers. So we can toggle those as well. Let's search for line numbers. And yeah, let's see Appearance, turn that off, apply the changes, and this is what you get. And yeah, you can take this further if you like, but I think you get the idea. All of this comes down to personality, so make sure that PHPStorm matches yours. Okay, welcome back. So in the last episode, of course, we installed PHPStorm, and then we applied our initial preferences and configuration. We even learned how to use the plugins section to install custom themes like Carbon and Nord. However, in this case, just to make sure we're all on the same page, why don't we stick with one of the defaults like Dark? I think that's fine for this series. Very good. Okay, so because the series is very much geared for and targeted at Laravel developers, the next step is to once again open Settings, go into Plugins, and then in the Marketplace section, search for Laravel. All right, this one at the top is what you want. It's so incredibly good. All right, now keep in mind, it is a paid plugin. At the time of this recording, it's around $4.90 a month, but there is a free trial, so you can test it out right now and see if it works for you. But you know what? Again, I can't believe how good it is, so I pay for it without even thinking. All right, let's restart, and that'll take effect. All right, and immediately I can see some changes here. Right off the bat, I see a Laravel icon to find related files for a user. So in this case, the related classes are the user factory as well as the migration. Okay, so that alone is actually pretty cool. If I'm ever in a model and I quickly want to browse the migration, I can click here and bada bing, bada boom, we're off to the races. Okay, so next, if I go to the very top, we will also see a new Laravel menu. All right, and lots to do here. I'm going to show you all of it. But real quick, while I have it open, let's go ahead and generate helper code. Okay, so this is going to make PHPStorm just that much more intelligent when it comes to Laravel and also some of the magic that comes along with Laravel. And we'll talk about that more later. Now, until we get to that section, to hold you over, or if you want to get a head start, there is a dedicated website for the plugin at laravel-idea.com, and you can have a look at the feature list here. And yeah, it's extensive. Code generation, eloquent completion, routing completion, request fields completion. So this is a single keystroke to automatically populate your request fields or your validation rules. And the list goes on and on. It's so incredibly good. I don't want to sell it to you, but at the same time, I'm going to sell it to you. It's that good. All right, so at this point, our setup is complete. And yeah, I think we're in really good shape here. Okay, so starting in the next section, one episode at a time, I'm going to show you my favorite PHPStorm features. I'll see you then. Next up, very quickly, we should talk about how to get around. Whether it's opening a file, or going to a method or a symbol, or even triggering a specific PHPStorm action. So let's get started. Now, of course, if I need to go to a particular file, how about the kernel in this case, I could open the sidebar. On the Mac, that is Command 1. And yes, of course, I could manually open HTTP and visit my kernel class in this way, and that's great. However, you may find that often it's much quicker to instead close the sidebar, so I will hit Command 1 again. And yeah, we're going to visit Navigate, and then notice these right here. So at the very top, we have Search Everywhere, and that's going to include anything. Go to a class, go to a file, go to a symbol, etc. Or we could narrow that down to filter only classes, or only files, or only symbols. All right, so let's close this out. I will hit Command W. All right, and let's try it again. So again, notice if I go back to Navigate, class on my machine is bound to Command O. So Command O. And let's type kernel. And of course, for Laravel projects, there are two kernel classes, one for your console entry point and one for your HTTP. So this is the one that I want. And yeah, you may find that, again, for your day-to-day workflow, this is a much quicker and snappier process. So if I close everything again with Command W, if I know at the top of my head, I need to go to kernel, Command O, kernel, and I'm there. Okay, but of course, instead, if I wanted to, I could visit Navigate File, and this is going to look not for the class name, but the name of the file. So notice here, it's matching the file name. And yeah, that's an option as well. But notice right here, we have a tab for classes. So I can switch or tab between classes or files or symbols. And notice if I hover over each one, it'll show me the keyboard shortcut. All right, so if I want to do files, that is Shift Command O, but classes is O. Or I could use the tab key and notice how I can tab between each of the options that I want to filter. So yeah, if you want, you could hit Command O and not even worry about memorizing the other ones. So if I want to look for a file, I would hit Tab and then begin searching. Or maybe you could memorize the All tab, and notice that is bound to Shift, Shift. All right, let's give that a shot. Shift, Shift, kernel. And yeah, of course, that works too. Just once again, keep in mind that with the All tab, you are filtering everything, which may not always be what you want. Okay, so what you might find is that it's useful to default to all, but then if you do need to further narrow it down by class or file or symbol, at that point you could use the tab key, and that might be a good workflow for you. It just depends. Okay, but now, Shift, Shift, that works. However, after years and years of working with code editors, Command P, at least on the Mac, is sort of ingrained in my fingers. So let's see if we can allow for that. I'm going to go up into PHPStorm settings, or once again, Command comma, and we're going to look at the key map. And yeah, here's all of the key bindings that we can tweak, and we can see what they are currently bound to. Or alternatively, if you know the shortcut, but maybe not what the name is, click on the search bar here, and you can type in the shortcut. So in this case, I will use, Command E. And sure enough, I can see everything that is bound to Command E, and then I can tweak it. All right, so that can be really useful in some cases. But yeah, otherwise, just search for what you want. And in our case, the command is search everywhere, I believe. All right, let's go to the top, and there it is, navigate search everywhere. So I will double click it, and let's add a shortcut of Command P. Now I bet though, when I do this, there might be some kind of conflict. So let's give it a shot. And sure enough, it lets us know, this is already assigned to something else. So we have parameter info and show hide path input field. So yeah, at this point, you need to decide, should we think of maybe a more unique shortcut, or are we okay with disabling these? And that's just up to you. In this case, I don't reach for these very much, so I don't mind. All right, so now it's going to let us know, do you want to remove those other assignments so that there are no conflicts? Yes, please do. Apply the changes, and that's all it takes. So now I can hit Command P to search anywhere in my project. All right, so let's just play around. Why don't we go into one of Laravel's controller? How about the parent controller? And I can see that it uses two traits. Okay, I'd like to learn more about this validates request trait. So I could go up to View, Quick Definition, and notice the key binding, Option Space on a Mac. And yeah, often this is all you need. A quick glance at the file, and then you're done. Or if you want to further edit the file, you could choose this option here or press Command down. There we go. But yeah, again, if your goal is to visit this file, well, there's no need for a two-step process. So how do I go back? Well, I could go back to Navigate, and then right up here at the top, we have Back. Go to your previous edit point. And once again, try to memorize these key bindings within reason. All right, now we're back there. This time, I'm simply going to press Command and then click on the file. And what's really great is this works for everything. It works for files or classes or even symbols and methods. So for example, if I browse this, it looks like Laravel calls a getValidationFactory method. All right, I'd like to learn more. So once again, I will press Command and click on the method name. And there we go. It works. Okay, cool. So now we're getting a little bit more comfortable. We know that, of course, I can press Command W on the Mac to close a file, or Control W, probably on Windows. Or I can press Command P to search for any file in my system. So I could do index.php, but in a real project, there might be lots of files with that same name. So yeah, I could narrow it down by directory, or I could even use the first letter of the directory name, like p/index.php. And notice it still finds the same file because it's leveraging fuzzy searching, which is really useful. Okay, so Command P, Tab to get around, very useful. I can Command click on files, or I can inspect them with quick definition. And notice here that's bound to Option Space on my machine. And then we also learned if I want to go back, I could go to Navigate Back, or I can use the shortcut, as you see here. And notice it's not just going back to the previous file, it's going to the previous edit point, as you see here. So often, yeah, if you're, this is great for source diving actually, if you're trying to learn something, all right, what's precognition? What's going on here? All right, we have this. And yeah, actually on that note, notice that I command clicked on this, but this is already the method definition, so there's nowhere to go. So instead, in those situations, it'll show me all of the usages, all of the places in the project where this method is called. And trust me, in your projects, you are going to reach for this all the time. It's incredibly useful. All right, so maybe, yeah, it looks like it's being referenced in start session.php, and we can have a look there. So again, great for source diving. And if I want to consecutively go back, I would use navigate back, or again, the shortcut. And then notice forward is the opposite. So I could cycle back, I keep pressing that, or go forward. Okay, but what if I want to go back to the previous file, not the previous edit point? Well, of course, I could just manually go to the file. So if I want to go back to user, I can Command P and search for user. Or again, if you prefer tabs, just re-enable them using tab placement. And yeah, then just click on the file. It works great. It's really common, maybe a tiny bit slower, but it's negligible. Another option, though, is to browse to recent files that you have worked with. So I can go up to View, and yeah, right down here, Recent Files. And again, notice the key binding, Command E. And then we also have Shift Command E for recent locations. Both of these are really, really useful. So let's have a look. I will press Command E, and yeah, now I see a filtered list of only the files that I have recently visited or opened. And then further, if you're working on a new feature and you want to narrow that down to only the files that you have actually edited, you can check this here. Yeah, and it looks like in this case, maybe I've done something to user. I'm not sure. Let's try it. Let's go to Command P, kernel, and let's make a small little tweak. Maybe I will comment this out by pressing Command /. And yeah, now if I hit Command E, show edited files, that is now included in the list. And then also notice how the checkbox itself is also bound to Command E. So yeah, your workflow might be Command E, E again, and then you can visit only the files that you have been working on. Very cool. Again, I reach for this all the time. So my workhorses are Command P to search everywhere, Command E to visit my recent files, and then as we discussed, there's also recent locations, which is Shift Command E. Let's try that. Shift Command E, and yeah, here's all of my recent locations. And yeah, maybe if you're a little more visually oriented, this might be the way to go. Yeah, I was down here, let's double click, and I'm back there in a flash. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you is how to filter tree views. So let's bring back my sidebar with Command 1. And yeah, one of my favorite things actually about PHPStorm is how all of the tree views, whether it's your project tree here or even your settings menu here, all of them can be filtered. And you just start typing. It's really easy. So for example, let's say I want to, I don't know, go to the routes directory here. I could select it manually, or I could type the beginning of routes, like this. And notice it instantly selects the first match. If I hit return, it opens the directory. And yeah, further, I could scroll down, or from here, I could type web, and it instantly selects the file. Yeah, so yet again, that's another way that you can quickly scan a project. All right, let's go up to settings, and the exact same thing. Maybe I know that, I don't know, maybe I want to work with a specific tool, or maybe I want to work with file watchers that we'll talk about later in the series. Well, I could just type in file watcher, and it instantly takes me there. Or at least it takes me to all the places where file watchers are referenced. So for example, if I go into notifications, yeah, we can see that there. So anytime I need to configure something, yeah, trust me, I'm not manually opening and closing all of these directories. I'm searching for what I need. And yeah, it works everywhere in PHPStorm. If you see a tree, you can filter it. Okay, so the final thing I want to show you is if you often keep the sidebar closed, as I suggested, but again, it's a preference thing. Do whatever you want. What about situations where you're not entirely sure where you want to go? Or maybe you want to create a file within a particular directory. What does the workflow look like for that? Well, again, you could just open the sidebar in those situations, or I like to do this. I would go to Navigate, and then right down here, jump to Navigation bar, or again, in real life, I would press Command Up. Okay, so notice I see a floating tree view. So notice I can use the arrow keys to cycle between these. So maybe something in app, maybe it's an HTTP, maybe it's a specific middleware. Yeah, that's the one I want, validate signature. And yeah, that's another way you can do it. But don't forget, if I bring that back up with Command up, this is once again a tree view, so I can filter this however I need to, which means I don't have to use the arrow keys if I don't want. If I quickly want to visit, I don't know, trim strings, yeah, in real life, I would type trim, and it instantly filters it down, and now I'm there. Pretty cool. And even better, while I have this floating menu, often you'll find when you're in a certain directory, like let's go back to controller, Command P, controller. Yeah, maybe I want to create a new controller within this directory. Well, one option is to hit Command up and then Command N for new directly within this folder. So let's create a new file. And what do I want here? What kind of file? A PHP class? Or because I have the Laravel plugin installed, I can generate a controller directly from this floating menu. All right, what do we call it? How about the obligatory post controller or post controller? And yeah, we're off to the races. And yeah, to be honest, I think that's a really cool workflow, actually. Command up, Command N to create a file in the current directory. Let's filter it down to Laravel. Let's do another controller. This can be, I don't know, maybe an invocable contact controller. So I will select single action. And yeah, it works great. All right, so if you need to watch this video one more time, get these keyboard shortcuts ingrained in your muscle memory, and when you're ready, let's move on to the next episode. Okay, so next up, why don't we take just a few minutes to talk about some of the options that are available to you when it comes to things like auto-formatting, okay? But first, before we get started, give me 30 seconds, and I'm going to make just a few tweaks that you might consider as well. Okay, first up, notice that I have the user class open. However, that's not represented in the sidebar. And sometimes that's what you want, but often I like to see that file within the sidebar. Okay, so if I go up here, I'll select the options, and notice right down here, always select Open File. Okay, so now, for example, if I go to Controller, Command P, Controller, notice it instantly switches and opens that controller's directory, and that's what I prefer. But yeah, you may run into situations where that's not what you want, but I find those cases to be somewhat rare. So in situations like that, just turn it off. And once again, you can select it here, but remember, you can use Command P. So select Open File, and yeah, I can turn it off right from the command prompt there. Okay, very cool. The next thing is, if I'm just browsing around the projects tree here, notice that by default, I have to double-click to open a file to the right. Again, I don't want that. So I will select here and choose Open Files with single click. Okay, so now I only have to click once to open a file. And yeah, that just feels a little better to me. Okay, so the final change I'm going to make is right here. In recent versions of PHPStorm, they will signal to you whether or not a symbol or a method or a class is being used. And that can be really useful. But again, personally, I prefer to turn that on when and if I need it. So for now, I will turn that off. And I can simply hover over, right-click, and say Hide Code Vision Usage Inlay Hints. And yeah, then right up here, we have the version control as well. Exact same thing. I could hide it, or if you want to configure all inlay hints, you can have a look here. But yeah, it just depends. Turn these on or off as you find them to be useful. Okay, very cool. So imagine, and let's go back to the user class. Yeah, imagine we have some non-standard formatting. For example, maybe this brace is up here on the same line. Maybe the imports are out of order and not lined up properly, something like that. Maybe the namespace is way up here. Why don't we add a function down here? A little tip, I can use pubf. This is a built-in snippet or live template. And then I can say test, enter, enter, and we're all set to go. But another option, if I hide this, is I could press Command J on the Mac, and this will bring up all of the live templates that we have available. So for example, I could look for function again, and yeah, now I can see one version for a standard public method and another one for a static version. So that works as well. Test. Okay, anyways, why don't we also put this on its own line? Again, this is just not following typical formatting style guides like PSR 12. So yeah, if I scroll up and I save with Command S, yeah, by default, PHPStorm doesn't do anything. You have to manually trigger the formatting. And once again, I can use Command P, and I can look for something like format. Here we go, format code and format file, and notice the shortcut here. All right, so I will use the shortcut. And yeah, that works. Notice it has some good defaults out of the box. It doesn't do everything here, but it fixes many of the more glaring issues that you might run into. Okay, now if we want to configure this, I can press Command, comma. Let's go into Editor, and then right down to Code Style for PHP files. And yeah, notice we can configure, do we want tabs or spaces? What are the rules for when to add a brace? Or if you don't care about this and instead you just want to apply a default, have a look right up here. I can set from, and then we can use a community standard, whether it's PSR 12 or Laravel's slight variation on that, or CodeIgniter or Symfony, or whatever you want. Now, this series is for Laravel developers, so why don't we select that and apply? And now we're off to the races. Okay, so this is great, but it's still not going to work when I save the file. So let's fix that. Once again, Command, comma, and this time we will come down to Tools and Actions on Save. All right, this is the panel that we want. All right, so let's talk about a few things. All right, so first, do we want to reformat our code whenever the file is saved? We can turn that on and give it a shot. So now I will hit Command S, and notice it does reformat the file automatically. All right, Command, comma, let's go on back. What about optimize imports? Well, if I turn this on, this will do exactly what you think. It will come way up here, and it will optimize these and order them to the best of its ability. So once again, if I hit Command S, there we go. And it looks like I'll have to manually fix that namespace, but that makes sense. But yeah, anyways, now the imports are grouped not according to their length, but their namespace. So in this case, all of the Illuminate packages are up here, but this one is Laravel, so that goes down below. Why don't we move it here, save the file again, and notice it reorders them. And then finally, this one is an optional trait that you might want to apply to your user class. However, it is commented out, so it's separated. But keep in mind, because we have optimize imports checked, if we had it like this, because we're now importing it, but I'm not actually using the trait, as soon as I save the file, it will be removed entirely. And again, there might be situations where you don't want that. So you just have to decide whether or not to turn these things on for your own projects. Okay, next up, rearrange code. Again, this is what you would expect. So imagine you have something like this. You have a field that for some reason is below one of your methods. Well, again, that's pretty non-standard. So if I do have rearrange code turned on, yeah, as soon as I save the file, as you see here, it will adjust the order of your constants and your fields and your methods to be a bit more traditional, as you see here. Okay, cool. All right, next we have run code cleanup. Let's turn that on. Yeah, this is one of the huge wins from using an intelligent IDE. So we can configure the inspections to give you an idea. And yeah, for PHP files, these are all just little tests that the editor will run to confirm, are you doing this in the right way? Could this be replaced with that? Is this a bad practice? Things of that sort. So for example, I don't know, why don't we take a look at code smells? Yeah, situations where maybe array search could be replaced with a simple in array. What else do we have here? Yeah, even things like this. Are there situations where preg match can be simplified? There's no reason paying that tiny cost if you could instead use something like string contains. How about this one? Preg split can be replaced with explode. All right, let's have a look and see that in action. Let's imagine we accept a value here. And maybe the default value is, some value, and then we're going to split that up into an array of words. Okay, well, you could do something like preg split, where you have a space as the separator, and then we compare that against the value itself and save the segments. But now notice the squiggly lines here indicating our code check. Preg split can be replaced with explode, which is cool. But also, we have a warning icon that will bring up all of the problematic parts of the current file. And yeah, just keep in mind, for any of these, if they are not appropriate or relevant for your project, of course you can disable them so that they don't fire. But yeah, in this case, it looks like we don't have a return type declared. Now, if I wanted to, I could right-click and then say Show Quick Fixes. But also notice, once again, I could instead, on a Mac, use Option Return. All right, so let's give that a shot. Option Return. And notice right now my cursor is directly on top of the squiggly lines there. All right, and yeah, here's our quick fix. Add void as the return type. Yeah, notice PHPStorm is smart enough to see, well, at the moment, you don't return anything from the method, so it seems like void is probably what you want. All right, next up, let's do another one. I can select this, or again, I can just hover over the issues. In this case, we have an unused local variable segments. So yeah, it's letting you know, hey, this is superfluous. You run this code, but you never do anything with it. So in this case, I bet if I run the quick fix, it removes the line entirely. And it does. Okay, and then finally, here is our code cleanup, option return. And yeah, it offers to swap that out with a call to explode instead. And actually, real quick, while we're here, notice these sort of mocked named parameters. That might be how you refer to it. You might find it very useful or maybe a touch annoying. Again, it's just a preference thing. But again, you can turn that off if you don't want to see them. I can say disable hence for method explode or disable hence entirely. And now they disappear. So yeah, decide for yourself if you want to keep those turned on. I sometimes go back and forth. Okay, so now, yeah, this is all well and good, but I think it would be unfortunate to finish this video without at least a small discussion around Laravel Pint. So let's have a look now. If we visit the Pint documentation on the Laravel website, yeah, we can see it's an opinionated code style fixer for minimalists. So it's effectively a wrapper around a tool called PHP CS Fixer that's just kind of easier to use and optimized for Laravel development. So it's possible that if you're switching over to PHPStorm, you might already be using a tool like Pint. And of course, if you want to use that in PHPStorm as well, you can. I'll show you how. The first step, if you're working along, is to install Pint into your project. So I will do that now. All right. And next, you can see that we can run Pint by referencing vendor, bin, Pint, and then optionally the path to a directory or a file name. Okay, let's go back to PHPStorm. Okay, so this time I will hit Command comma and set up a file watcher. And notice at the moment, we don't have any registered. So let's hit Configure and let's create a new one. And yeah, this is going to do exactly what you think. It watches a file for changes, and then it triggers any kind of program that you need. So why don't we call this Pint? We are going to watch PHP files. Where are you? Let's use the automatic filtering. There we go. The scope is going to be the project files. That's fine. And then what tool are we going to run? And yeah, if I want, I could select the folder icon here and then browse into my vendor bin directory and choose our Pint executable. That would be fine. Or if I want this to be dynamic, I can also use PHPStorm variables. So I could delete that and add a variable or a macro. It looks like they call them. All right, and I'm not sure what it's called. Let's just look for something like project. Yeah, this is what we want. The directory of the project file, and that's what we want. All right, and notice here's the syntax. The variable name or the macro name begins and ends with a $sign. Okay, arguments. Well, in this case, the argument should be the path to the file. So once again, let's see if we can just find some kind of like relative file path. Let's see. File path. Yeah, nobody expects you to memorize all of these. Yeah, maybe this one. File path relative to the project file. Yeah, so if I save, app/model/user, this would give me app/model/user. And that's what we want. Okay, next, after the program runs, should we refresh any files in our editor? Yes, the same file. So I will paste that again. And then finally, what is our working directory? Well, again, that's the project files directory. Okay, and then under advanced options, do we want to auto-save edited files to trigger the watcher? No, we don't need to do that, but I do want to trigger the watcher on external changes. All right, I think that looks pretty good to me. So now we've set up a file watcher. If I come back to actions on save, you'll see that it's turned on. Okay, so this is good, but we actually have a problem. Currently, whenever I save a file, we are actually formatting the code 2 times. Think about it. Right here, I click Save, and then PHPStorm will reformat the project or the code or the file. But then right down here, the file watcher picks up on the change, and then it references the Pint program, and that formats the file as well. Okay, so of course, we don't want to do that. Just pick one or the other. So if we are going to stick with Pint, we should disable formatting for PHP files. So I will deselect that, apply it, and yeah, I think we should be good to go here. All right, so let's go into anything. How about back into our controller? And then, yeah, we'll add a function here, test, but this time we will screw up the formatting as you see here. All right, so now if we did everything correctly, when I save the file, it's going to trigger the Pint executable, and we should see a little update. I don't know if you saw it, but it was there in the bottom right corner. It calls Pint. Pint is triggered on the current file, and then we refresh the file to reflect the change. So once again, I'm going to slow this down, have a look in the bottom right, and there we go. It's working. All right, so granted, we covered a lot there, but yeah, this is core stuff to your workflow. So make sure that you optimize and configure this precisely to your needs. All right, next up, why don't we have a look at code generation? Okay, so for an example, imagine that you need to generate, say, an eloquent model. All right, well, traditionally, in a different editor, you might switch to your terminal. So you could do it like this, PHP artisan make model. And how about a model for, I don't know, an activity feed? So we will call it activity. All right, and that looks good. Now, of course, I'd open up app, models, activity, and we're off to the races. And yeah, this is sort of the traditional approach. It works great. Now, first, keep in mind that PHPStorm does have a built-in terminal that you can reach for. You can turn it on in a few ways. Go to View, Appearance, and we could enable tool window bars. And yeah, now I can toggle many things. And right down here at the bottom is the terminal, and that works great. Another option, and actually real quick, let's turn that off. Another option would be to manually select View, Tool Windows, and then come down to Terminal. Next, we could use the Search Anywhere prompt. By default, that is Shift-Shift, but we rebound that to Command-P, and I could look for Terminal in that way. Or, of course, we could use the keyboard shortcut. And it looks like by default, that is bound to Option F12. But, of course, once again, you can bind that to any keystroke you want. Just hit Command, comma, go to your key map section, and then you can bind it here. All right, very cool. So anyways, this is fine, and it's very much a traditional workflow. However, let's delete this. I'll hit delete. I will select the current directory, press Command-N, and yeah, have a look right down here. We have this Laravel menu for Laravel-specific file templates or generators. But now just keep in mind, if you're not seeing this on your machine, of course, go to your settings, visit the plugins area, and make sure that you have the Laravel plugin installed. Otherwise, it won't work. Okay, anyways, let's do it again. Command-N. This time, I'll just start typing to filter the results. I'll hit Enter, and let's generate a model. Okay, we called it activity, right? And notice by default, it has all of these selected, which means when I run this command, it'll create the model, but also a migration, also a factory, also a JSON resource, all the things that you might be used to when working with Laravel. But yeah, if you don't want that, just disable these. And this would give you a simple activity model, as you can see here. All right, so we have a little pop-up. Do we want to add this to Git? No, and don't ask again. Great. Also notice when we run that command, behind the scenes, the plugin will automatically update its helper code, which is great. Okay, so let's do this workflow again. So of course, you can manually select the directory, but like I discussed, I will often keep that sidebar hidden. Instead, I could either use the floating menu by pressing Command up, and yeah, I could just find it in this way, app, models, and then Command N with that directory created. Or there is a plugin-specific generator that we can reach for. Let's go to the top, and you'll see a Laravel menu. And yeah, we'll select code generation, or again, notice there is a shortcut, Shift, Command, comma. So let's try that now, Shift, Command, comma. And yeah, if I type create, you'll see a massive list of all the various Laravel things that we can generate. So yeah, if I want a model, I could type create model, or really just model would be fine. All right, so once again, the workflow would be on my machine, Shift, Command, comma, model, return, activity, and this time, why don't we populate the fields? And this is especially useful if we also want to have it take care of our migration. And then why don't we also ask it for a factory, a controller, and a form request? Okay, so what might we need for activity? Well, probably a user ID, and that would be a unsigned big integer. I can hit tab and space to add more, so that way I don't have to use the mouse if I don't want to. And who knows, maybe activity has, I don't know, a body or a message. Why don't we stick with message? And that can even be text if we need to. And yeah, that's fine for now. So let's go ahead and run this. And there we go. So now, yeah, think about it. It took only a few seconds to run a command that generates our activity model. It creates the migration file. It populates the schema for a migration file. And yeah, once again, if I go to the terminal and I run git status, here's all of the other things it created. So it added a controller, an activity request, form request, the model, a database factory, and the migration. And yeah, you'll even notice if I go into activity controller, it will populate this. And again, you can delete this if you want, but it'll give you a basic idea of what you probably want. So in this case, we have a standard resource for displaying activities. So if I add a new activity, that will accept a form request. And notice again, it will populate that for you. And yeah, like I said, this is incredibly helpful stuff. Trust me, you're going to reach for it all the time. And then also keep in mind, if I open up, say, my model, well, have a look at this little Laravel icon here. If I select it, now it'll show me all related files for this model. So in this case, it would be the database factory as well as the migration, and that can be really helpful. All right, let's do another one. Let's use the obligatory, let's close these out, the obligatory post model. All right, Shift Command comma. Let's generate a model for a post, tab, tab. A post consists of a title. Let's space that another one. How about a body? And that will be text. And then a post also belongs to an owner. So why don't we call that user ID? And that will be a big integer. Okay, why don't we also create, in this case, let's say I don't need a form request, but just the migration, factory, and controller. All right, there we go. So here's our migration. If I want, I could bring back the terminal and run PHP artisan migrate, and that'll whip it up on the fly. All right, let's go to the post model, Command P, post, and that looks good. Why don't we switch to the factory, and we can review and tweak it however we need to. So in this case, why don't we make user ID equal to a user factory so that the relationship points to an actual user in our system that we generate. Finally, let's visit the post controller. And yeah, you'll see it will automatically populate something resembling what you would probably want in real life. All right, and finally, let's talk about some standard file generation. So within the app directory, Command N, let's create a simple PHP class, and we'll call it project. And let's do this. I will first hide the sidebar with Command 1, and let's say a project needs to be instantiated with a title. Okay, I could say protected string title. And now notice if within this class, or within the curly braces, if I hit Command N, I can generate the constructor dynamically. And notice here, it does give me the option of including the title as part of the constructor. So now if I run that, it does it for me automatically. Okay, what else? Well, what about these doc blocks here? They're a little bit superfluous. Well, if we want, of course, we could disable it. Or if I press Option Return, yeah, right down here at the bottom, I can remove redundant doc blocks. And that's an option as well. Okay, and the same is going to be true here if I did not have the field. Notice that we have a squiggly line here where it lets you know, hey, this property is currently dynamic and you may not want that. Once again, select it, Option Return, and I can manually add that property. All right, but in this case, it's set to private, and maybe I want it to be protected. Once again, Option Return, and I can switch that to protected or public. Or, just to keep having fun, at least what I consider fun, if we are using PHP 8 or higher, I could alternatively select here, Option Return, and I can switch this or convert it to promoted properties. And now we can do it all inline there. All right, let's save, reformat, and that looks good to me. Okay, next we can also generate getters and setters. Now just keep in mind, in the latest version of PHP, you might be able to get away with something like that by declaring it read-only. But yeah, otherwise, if you want a traditional getter or setter, it's the exact same process. Command N, and let's create a getter, and I only have a title here, so that's all I see. Let's generate that, and there we go. Let's now do it again for a setter, but this time I won't touch the mouse. All right, Command N, I will type to start filtering it, return, return again, and now we have a setter and a getter. Or, of course, you can do them at the exact same time. So Command N, and there's an option for getters and setters. All right, and I think that's going to do it. So what did we learn in this video? Well, two things. First up, we learned that, as always, Command N is your friend. Just position the cursor, hit Command N, and have a look at all the generators that pop up. But second, because we have the Laravel plugin installed, we have a wide array of file generators that we can reach for. And then further, in situations where you're generating a model, yeah, this is going to take you 98% of the way. So it's pretty cool, and I promise you're going to reach for it constantly. All right, next up, why don't we talk about speed and how, using the Laravel Idea plugin, we can take common tasks and execute them in a flash. I'll show you what I mean. All right, so once again, I will create a post model. So on a Mac, Shift-Command-C, create a model, and I'll call it post. A post consists of a title and a body, and then also a user who wrote the post, and that'll be a big integer. All right, that looks good. So now imagine the eloquent relationship between a post and a user. And of course, that relationship is a belongs to relationship. So of course, traditionally, we could write this out. User, return this belongs to user. It's a lot of writing, isn't it? And then I can also add the return type, which is a belongs to. And yeah, that works. It's fine. But again, it takes a little while. So here are some ways that we can shorten that. So let's bring it back to what I had before. And yeah, one obvious thing we can do is reach for a text snippet, or in PHPStorm, we'd call them live templates. So out of the box, I can use pub F, and notice it pops up right there. Or alternatively, I can press Command J, and this will bring up all of the snippets I can reach for. All right, now, once again, I can hit user, and then tab or return between the edit points. Enter, enter. Yeah, and then once again, I can return that relationship. Okay, a little bit better, but we can keep going. Now notice, whenever I call a method, I have to type $this, arrow, and then the method name. However, you can omit the this part, and PHPStorm will take care of it for you. So if I want to call a belongs to method, I can just say belongs to, and notice it instantly pops up. When I hit return, notice PHPStorm adds the current instance. All right, so if instead this were a has many relationship, I could say return has many, and yeah, it's just a little bit quicker, but it really does add up over time. Okay, so better, but we can still take this a little further using the Laravel Idea plugin. So if I want to add a belongs to relationship to an eloquent model, have a look. All I have to do, as it turns out, is type the relationship name, and I see these two snippets or templates pop up. One is for a generic belongs to reference, but this second one is really cool. If I hit return, all right, come on, that's really neat. And think about it. The plugin is smart enough to know that there is a user ID for the post migration, which means there will be a corresponding relationship. And that's very, very cool. All right, let's do another one. A post consists of comments, right? So let's get into the workflow. Shift-Command-C, make me a new model for a comment. A comment belongs to a user. A comment has a body. And then also a comment belongs to a post. So post ID is also a big integer. All right, let's give that a run. All right, there we go. And yeah, we should probably update this to add the necessary foreign key constraints. But again, this will take us 95% of the way there. Okay, let's update our relationships. So back to post, the relationship is has many, right? A post has many comments. So I type the relationship name, And once again, the plugin is smart enough to know that we're probably looking for comments. Very cool. Now let's do the same thing, but in reverse. So I will command click on the comment model, and a comment belongs to both a user as well as a post. All right, here we go. Belongs to a user and belongs to a post. I mean, come on. How cool is that? Okay, now, easily one of the most compelling features of PhpStorm is, of course, its refactoring capabilities. So why don't we have a look at that now? And to illustrate this, I'm going to use a tweaked version of a Laracast-specific class called AI Chat. Okay, now, don't worry about the code too much, but it does what you would expect it to. It gives us a way to prepare a conversation and send it over to OpenAI, fetch a response, remember it. Yeah, exactly what you would expect. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do here is, well, have a look at the doc blocks. We can actually make this a little bit prettier by hovering to the left, right-clicking, and choosing Render All Doc Comments. Okay, so now it's a slightly different presentation. It might take a little getting used to, but these days I very much prefer it. Okay, very good. So now we're going to scroll down to this prompt method. We have a bunch going on here, and I think we can refactor it a little bit. So quickly, let's do the 5-second pass to see what it does. Now, if we call this prompt method, we can pass through a message like, "Hi, how are you?" When we do that, we record that prompt within a messages array, and then we pass that array to OpenAI. And yeah, if you're curious, when you're actually performing a chat with OpenAI, it doesn't remember previous messages magically. Instead, what you're doing is you are personally tracking it within an array like this. And then when you send a new message, you're actually sending through the entire conversation, and then it reads from that. Okay, so anyways, we then await a response, and that response might be, "I'm doing great. How are you doing?" And then we record that response as well within the messages array, so that again, the next time we send a message, this array will contain our message and then OpenAI's response and then our next message. Okay, so yeah, I think we can make some slight tweaks here. First up, this is fine initially, but we might run into situations where, for example, we want to write a message without immediately sending it to OpenAI. Okay, so it sounds like maybe this right here represents writing a message. So how could we do this? Well, again, traditionally, with a simple code editor, we might extract a method like a public function, write, and then I could grab all of this, cut it, and paste it in. We will then need to accept a prompt. And yeah, if we want, we could then return the current instance, and we can add the return type like so. Okay, so now up here, I can say this write and send through the prompt. And yeah, that works. I've done that a million times, but of course we are using an IDE that is much more powerful. So why don't we just let it do the work? All right, I will hold down Command Z to undo that. There we go. All right, this time I will select the code, and I'll show you a few ways to do this. First, I can right-click, scroll down to Refactor, and then I can choose Extract Method. But also, while we're here, notice that there's already a key binding for this. And on the Mac, that would be Option-Command-M. So we could use that as well if we want. Okay, and now what will we call this? Well, we named it write. Hit return, and we're done. Yes, so much faster. So how can we look at this? Well, I could scroll down, or once again, I could press Command and click on the method name, and that'll take me there. Cool. Yeah, this is pretty much what I want. However, I do want it to return the current instance. So in this case, I will manually update it, and that's fine. Looks good. Okay, now how do I go back to where I was before? Well, once again, you can just scroll up, or as we learned, on the Mac, I can press Command, open curly brace, and that takes me to my previous edit point. Or if I hit Command, close curly brace, that takes me forward in time. So yeah, think of it as parallel to undo or redo, but instead it points to edit points. So go back to the last edit point or go forward to the next edit point. Very useful. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Next though, what does all of this represent? Well, this represents sending through the messages and performing our API call. So yeah, once again, it might be fine here, or there might be situations where you want to send this API request without first including a prompt, right? So yeah, this is another example of extracting a method. So once again, right-click, refactor, extract method, or here's something I like to do. If I instead hit, let's select it all one more time. If I instead hit, by default, Control-T, this will bring up a refactor this window. And now I can just choose whatever I want. So yeah, if you're the type where you already have so many key bindings in your head and you don't want more, you can consolidate all of these down to a single keystroke. And then once again, you can filter down simply by typing. And real quick, if you want to rebind that to something else, hit Command, comma to go to Settings, go into Key Map. We already know what the shortcut is, so I could type that in here, Control-T. And yeah, once again, I can double-click and add a new keyboard shortcut and just choose anything you want. So for me, I have that bound to Option-Command-R. That is a custom shortcut. I just think R for refactor, and that fits my brain. But yeah, again, do whatever you want. All right, so let's do it. And this time, why don't we include return this so that also is extracted. All right, Command, Option-R, or again, by default, Control-T. All right, I will type method, and yeah, that looks good, and we said send. All right, so yeah, now notice, because we returned this as part of that extraction, it is smart enough to know, all right, well, this, or the current instance, is returned from this method, so I can then return what is returned from that method from this method, and that matches the return type. So once again, I will Command-click on send, and this is what we have. All right, finally, let's return to our prompt method, like so. And yeah, now if I want, because the right method already returns the current instance, I could optionally chain these like this. Return this, right, send, and then clear that out. And yeah, I think that looks pretty good. All right, we'll keep going in the next episode. All right, let's keep going. I'd like to review more of PHPStorm's refactoring capabilities. Okay, so once again, I'm within this AI chat class, and I'd like to navigate to a method within this file called send. All right, so of course I could scroll the page, and that's fine. But another option is to view the structure of this file, and I'll show you how to do that. First, I need to go up to View, Appearance, and I can turn on Tool window bars, or on the Mac, I can double press the Command key, and you'll see that temporarily toggles the window. So if I let go of Command, it goes away. All right, so let go, double press Command, and it pops up. And yeah, I want to choose this one here, Structure, or again, there's a keyboard shortcut that defaults to Command 7, or bind it to whatever you want. There we go. So now, yeah, I see the symbols for all of the methods within this single class. And yeah, it looks like send popped up, so it instantly navigated there. If I click at the top, it'll bring me to the declaration of the class. So yeah, that would be one option. Now another option, if I hide this, let's go back to the top, is to open the Search Everywhere panel. And yeah, again, I can go up to Navigate, Search Everywhere, or we bound that to Command P. And yeah, if I'd like, I can tab a few times over to Actions and then look for File Structure. So again, notice this is by default bound to Command F12, but if I run it, now this shows me a floating panel of all of the various symbols within this file. And yeah, again, I can filter anything. So I could type send, and that brings it up, hit enter, and that instantly brings me there. And yeah, generally that's how I will get around a file. So once again, if I'm at the top of the file and I need to go to the send method, I will hit F12, or again, I don't love that binding, but it'll do for now. So once again, bring it up, type send, hit return, and we're there. Okay, so just keep in mind that this will only work for the symbols within the current file. However, if I close this out and I don't have any file open, I can still navigate to that unique method by pressing Command P and searching for send. Just keep in mind, this is going to show me all occurrences and files and symbols related to send. But yeah, you'll notice PHPStorm is pretty smart. And at the top, it found a method called send, and that's the one I want. All right, so again, that's a blazing fast way to navigate your project. Okay, so anyways, let's keep talking about some refactoring options. So right down here, we send all of the messages to OpenAI, and we receive a response. And then if we want to grab the actual text content of that response, so if I said, hello, OpenAI, and its response is, hello, back to you, well, we would actually go into the choices array, grab the message object, and then the content. And yet that would be equal to something like hello, back to you, that comes from OpenAI. Okay, cool. So maybe we've decided, this is a little bit long. Why don't we extract this into a variable? Okay, well, again, traditionally, you might cut this and rename it to content, and then say content equals, and then paste that in. And again, that's totally fine. However, with an IDE, they can do that work for you. So I will press Command-C just a few times to bring it back to what we started with. Instead, with all of this selected, once again, I will bring back that refactoring panel. And yeah, as we learned, I can either right-click and go to Refactor, or we can use the shortcut, which defaults to Control-T. Okay, so now, what do I want to do here? I want to extract a variable. And here, it looks like they call it actually introduce variable. That's fine. Select it. What do we want to call it? Content is fine. Hit return to effectively commit the change. And yeah, that does the trick. But just a couple little things to talk about there. So once again, I will hit Command-C to bring this back. If instead my cursor is just somewhere like right here, and I bring that up, if I introduce a variable, yeah, notice we have various expressions that we could choose from. And as I cycle down here, it selects larger pieces of that full expression. So yeah, if I only want to extract the response choices array into a variable, I could select that, and this will do the trick. But yeah, in our case, I want the full thing. So once again, introduce variable, and I want the one at the bottom. Or another option is, of course, to simply select the entire thing and then bring up the panel. Or instead of manually selecting it, and actually, by the way, I know I'm throwing a lot of shortcuts in your face. You don't have to remember them all. Just pick the ones that stand out to you. Maybe even write them down on a sheet of paper, stick it to your monitor, and then it's amazing how quickly they become muscle memory. But yeah, another option is to press Option Up, and notice this will expand my selection here all the way up. I can go to the entire class, or if I press Option Down, it reduces the selection. And yeah, this is something I reach for all the time as an aside. So maybe if I wanted to select this entire array, I wouldn't use the mouse. Instead, I would just put my cursor anywhere here and press Option Up until I reach the array there. Okay, so let's try it out. Here, I want to extract this to a variable. All right, Option Up just a few times. I will bring up the refactoring menu. I will type var for variable. I will extract a variable called content and then press return to commit that, so to speak. Okay, very cool. That works great. Okay, but next I'm seeing we have this response variable and it's only used right here. So maybe I could inline this entire thing and remove that variable entirely. Okay, so again, traditionally, you might just cut that out and then here, replace it like so, and get rid of the variable. And that's fine. Sometimes I still do that. But of course, PHPStorm can inline the variable automatically. So let's bring it back to what we had before. And this time, I'm just going to put my cursor on top of the variable. I will bring up the refactoring panel with Control-T. And this time, we want inline. Or again, notice the shortcut if you want to memorize that. So let's run that. And now it's going to say, hey, do we want to inline all references and remove the variable? Yes, we do. Run the refactor. And yeah, notice it does the exact same thing. So yeah, all of these little refactoring tricks and shortcuts that I'm showing you, trust me, I reach for them constantly. And what's cool is because it's so fast, you can play around. Like maybe you decide, well, for that matter, we only declare the content variable once. Would it be okay to inline it here? Let's try it out. Inline, run it, and here you might decide, oh, that's fine. Or you might think, there's maybe a little too much going on here. And you know, just depending on the day, you might come out one way, and another day you'll say, I'd rather have the variable. But yeah, it's very easy to test out these little refactors without much effort at all, which is really cool. Okay, so now, why don't we finish up with one more? I think content is fine. I mean, it does point to that, but maybe in our heads, it fits better if we call it response. All of this is generating a text response from OpenAI. Okay, so again, if I want to rename this traditionally, you would just do something like this, response, and then you'd find any usages and update those as well. But again, we could use the refactoring panel if we want, and that can often be a safer option as well. So let's put the cursor on the variable, bring up the refactoring panel with Control-T, and yeah, it's number 1, rename. Okay, so now it's going to ask us, do we want to rename just the code occurrences of content or all occurrences? So notice with the second one, that also includes the content key, which is a string, but I don't want that in this case. So we will do the first, and let's change it to response and hit return to commit it. Yeah, let's try it one more time. Control-T, enter to rename, and change it back to content. And yeah, it's so fast and safe. So you can imagine if down here we appended something to it, like, okay, done, this is dumb. But if we had to append to content in some way, well, right up here, when I rename it, it would rename all occurrences and references to that variable. So if I change this to response, notice how they all update on the fly using multiple cursors, which I promise we will review soon. All right, so yeah, I hope you're seeing for yourself what a time saver these refactoring capabilities can really be. But we're not done yet, so let's keep going in the next episode. Okay, next up, let's review how to extract a field or a property. Okay, so once again, I'm within this AI chat class. And yeah, let's start by visiting the send method that we extracted in the last episode. Okay, so once again, this response will be a string that is equal to whatever the response message is from OpenAI. So if I send it hello, maybe its response is hello back to you. Okay, and then we update this messages array, and then we return the current instance. But yeah, there might be situations where we want a helpful getter that gives us the last text response from OpenAI. But yeah, right now it doesn't seem like there's an easy way to do that. Instead, I would have to fetch the entire messages array, get the most recently pushed item from it, or the last item, and then read the value for this content key. Yeah, it's just a little bit clumsy if that's something I may frequently need to access. Okay, so let's review some solutions. First up, I'm going to select the variable and then bring up my refactoring menu with Control-T by default. Let's come down to Introduce Field, or again, Option Command F. All right, let's call it Response, and there we go. So now I have a new response property, and by the way, if you want to see it, you can Command-click on it right here, and it takes us up. Okay, so you'll notice a little squiggly here. That's because it wasn't able to infer what the appropriate type is. So let's add string. And then just to be consistent, I will once again bring up my quick fix menu and tweak this to be protected. Okay, so again, if I see a property and I'm curious, well, where is that being used? The exact same process. I can command click on the property, and this will show me everywhere that it's being referenced within this file. So yeah, once again, it looks like on 96 as well as line 105. Yeah, pretty cool. That works great. Seamless. Okay, so now we have this property, but it's still not accessible from the outside world, so to speak. So let's return there with command click, and let's generate a getter. So once again, selecting the property name, I will hit Command N, or I could bring up the quick fix menu, and this will give me the option to add a getter. And we can see a quick example for what that's going to look like. All right, that looks good to me. Hit return, and yeah, there we go. So now we have a getter or an accessor that returns the current value of the most recently created response. Okay, great. And yeah, now if we want, name it whatever you want. Response, last response, last update, whatever makes sense for you. Okay, very cool. But now maybe later we decide, well, it was a little cumbersome to manually go into the messages array and then grab the last item and then grab the content key. But if we wrap that up within a getter, it's fine if we dynamically fetch that. So in that case, we no longer have a need for the response field. Okay, so let's get rid of it. Let's go back up. And yeah, there's a couple of ways that we can remove it. So I will once again bring up the quick fix menu. And yeah, have a look down here at the bottom. Rollback changes in current file. So if we run this, yeah, it's just going to revert it to how it was previously. Perfect. So now if I return to send, we could do the exact same thing here to return it to how it originally was. And yeah, that's just one way. In this case, it's still a little bit cumbersome, but that's one way that you could revert your changes. But now, of course, this is no longer right because it's referencing a property that doesn't exist. All right, let's make our fix. So to grab the last item from the messages array, of course, there's 101 ways to do it. You could use the end function. That'll work. It will change, of course, the internal pointer, but that may not matter. Alternatively, though, we're using Laravel, so why don't we reach for Illuminate Support Array, or ARR, and that offers a handy-dandy last method. So I will give it the messages array, and then we will grab the content key. And yeah, that will do the trick. So now, if I have an instance of this chat class, at any point, if I want to fetch the most recent text response from OpenAI, I now have a getter to do that. Okay, so in this episode, you learned about introducing a field using the refactor menu. You also learned how to generate a getter. And keep in mind, if I go to the top, for any property here, you can select it, hit Command-N or the quick fix menu. And then here, you can generate a getter or a setter or both at the same time. Alternatively, though, if you're not selecting a property, you can generate it using Command-N. And notice if I create some getters, I can do them in bulk. So I could select token and messages. And now, as you see here, we have getters for both of those. But yeah, in this case, it doesn't quite make sense. So I will undo that. All right, onward to the next episode. All right, welcome back. So why don't we wrap up this refactoring chapter with one more technique. I will show you how to both extract a class and then take members, methods, or properties and pull them up to the parent. All right, let's get going. So for this example, I've created an achievements directory with two different example achievement badges or awards, very similar to what you might see at a site like Laracasts. So we have one called First 1000. And yeah, here we can see an achievement badge has a name, in this case, First 1000, a description, so you get this one after you reach your first 1,000 points, a level, so how difficult is it to acquire this badge, an icon, and then finally a qualifier that determines whether or not you qualify for this badge. So yeah, in this case, it looks like you get this badge if you reach 1,000 experience points. So the qualifier just looks at the current user's experience points, and we check, is it at least 1,000? If so, that returns true, which means you get that badge. All right, let's go to Welcome to the Community. And yeah, the exact same thing. So you get this one after your first post on the forum. It is a beginner badge. And yeah, in this case, it's very simple. We just do an SQL query. Check to see, do they have any conversations or replies to conversations? If it's at least one, then welcome to the community. You get the idea. Okay, so I'd like to clean this up because I am seeing a lot of duplication. So let's do this one at a time. The first thing I see is right here, the level. This is where we hard code a string that indicates how difficult it is to acquire. So we're assuming beginner, intermediate, and advanced. But again, I am manually writing that string for each class. And you can imagine if there are 50 different achievement badges, yeah, it's just a lot of repetition and duplication. And there's an opportunity for these things to become out of sync. Even if it's just a capitalization issue, or maybe you forget, and you forgot that it was beginner, intermediate, and advanced, and you assumed it was basic, medium, and high. You get the idea. There's an opportunity for things to become out of sync. So instead, we usually solve this problem by extracting either a constant or an enum. Both are fine. Let's just keep it simple and extract a constant. So we'll do that now. I will select the word, Control-T to bring up the refactoring menu, and we want number 2, introduce constant. Or again, I can just start typing. All right, and here's the suggestion. I think that's fine for now, so return, and we commit it. Okay, so now that adds a constant to the top of the file. And yeah, I guess we could do the same thing for first 1000. So I will manually just paste that in and then swap it out down here. But as you're probably thinking, that sort of defeats the purpose, doesn't it? Now I'm just hard coding the string within every single achievement badge class, and we haven't really fixed the issue. So why don't we extract this to a parent class that all of these achievement classes can then inherit from? All right, let's do that now. Now, of course, I could manually create the new file, or I can let PHPStorm do it for me. So once again, Control-T to bring up the refactoring menu, and this time I want to extract a class. Let's call the class achievement type. And yeah, for now, I will only include the constant. But yeah, in real life, I would do a lot of these steps at once, but for educational purposes, we'll do it one at a time. All right, and there we go. We have our new achievement type class. And now if I switch back here, you will see, well, it didn't know that we wanted to inherit. We didn't know that it's a parent class. So if I scroll down, you can see it's just deferring there, and we get a squiggly line because that constant has protected visibility. All right, so let's fix this. I will extend from achievement type, and then right down here, if I want, I could do self or static. Okay, so I can grab that, and if I switch to welcome to the community, I can do the exact same thing here. Paste it in, and then inherit from achievement type. Cool. But now, while I'm here, I'm noticing that both of these return beginner. And maybe it'll turn out that, well, beginner is a sensible default for achievement types. So we want to have the option to change that, but then again, yeah, assume beginner for any new achievements that we create. That might be a good choice. So in these situations, here's what I can do. I will select the method, press Control-T to once again refactor, and this time I'm going to pull members up. So usually I just type up. All right, so now I'm going to take this level method and pull it up to the parent. All right, that's done. Let's go to the parent, and here we go. But yeah, it looks like in this case I forgot to update this, so let's change that back to self beginner. All right, so let's go to, let's see, first 1,000. That can now be removed. And then welcome to the community, we removed that as well. I can get rid of this. Cool. So yeah, we're just making small incremental steps to make things a little bit more cleaner and intuitive. All right, let's keep going. What else? Well, what about the qualifier here? It sounds like every single achievement has or requires a qualifier. So why don't we make that explicit? And again, you can declare an interface, or because we already have a parent class, well, why don't we just create an abstract class like this? Public abstract function qualifier that will expect a user, and it then returns a Boolean that indicates if you qualify for that badge. And yeah, of course, right now PHPStorm's letting me know, well, hey, you have an abstract method here. So in those situations, you also have to declare that the class itself is abstract. So again, I can manually do that, or I can bring up the quick fix menu with option return. And yeah, here I can do that automatically. Cool. So are there any other places we should do that? Well, maybe for now the description. So let's come back. I will duplicate this and update it. Description, and that will return a string. Okay, so now think about it. If I create a new achievement class, I extend from that parent, but I forget to include a description, it's going to notify me right away. So for example, if I got rid of that one as well, you either have to declare this abstract or implement the methods. So if I hit option return, you'll see there is an option to add the missing method stubs. And in this case, that would be qualifier and description. And that's what you want. All right, cool. So I'm going to hit Command-Z a couple times to bring back what we had before. And we're making good progress. Okay, so the next things I see are stuff like this. Notice the icon follows a common pattern. It's basically the file name, but lowercase and then camel case, and then we add SVG at the end. So first1000.php turns into first-1000.svg, and the same thing is true for welcome to the community. All right, so in situations like this, it's probably true that every single achievement icon will follow this exact same pattern. But we still want to offer the ability to override it if necessary. I just want to assume, again, a sensible default. So let's do that. First, though, before I can push this or pull this up to a parent class, I need to make it dynamic so that the implementation is the same across all achievement classes. So I think what we could do is something like this. Laravel, and let me know in the comments if you can think of a quicker way. But off the top of my head, Laravel has a function called class base name that's going to give me effectively the name of the file only. So if I do this, this would correspond to welcome to the community. I could then pass that to string kebab, and that would then give me welcome to the community. And then it looks like the only thing that's remaining is to concatenate .svg, and that will give us this. Okay, cool. So think about it. If I get rid of that, I could then effectively swap out first thousand's implementation with a dynamic version as well, and everything, I haven't tested this, but I think that's right, everything will still work. Okay, so now that I've made them the same, I can then pull the implementation up to the parent. So select the method, Control-T, bring it up into the parent, perform the refactor, and now it's gone, and it's instead in the parent, as you see right here. Okay, and actually I'd probably prefer this to come up a couple levels. So I will hit Shift-Command-Up to bring this up directly below the level method. All right, cool. So in first thousand, we already did that. Welcome to the community. This one can leave as well. All right, finally, I think we can do the exact same thing for the name method. Now, again, off the top of my head, I'm not sure if Laravel offers a way to convert something that is studly case into sentence case, although it rings a bell. It's just not coming to me right now. So why don't we manually do it with preg replace? I think I could do this. I could look for any capital letter within this file name and replace it with a space. So something like space, and then the matching letter, and then feed it the name of the file. And yeah, again, I'm not going to test this, but I think this is right. Think about it. If we have welcome to the community, we're going to match every capital letter, like this one and here, and those capital letters also correspond to the beginning of new words. So we're going to replace it with a space, and then the capital letter. And then finally, just to be safe, maybe if there's a space at the beginning or the end, I will trim that off, and now I've made it dynamic. And yeah, same little approach here, and I don't have to follow this. I'm just doing it for your benefit. I've now made the implementations identical across all implementations, so I can now pull it up a level to the parent. Like so. Come to welcome to the community, and this one can go as well. All right, so now, yeah, have a look at how much cleaner this is. Now, each achievement class I create only requires a description and a qualifier. And everything else, all of the other nitty-gritty details, are instead located within the parent class, as you see here. And I'm going to bring this up as well. Maybe like this, name, level, icon, and then 2 abstract methods. And actually, let's put description like that. Okay, so here's first 1,000. And here's welcome to the community. So yeah, now you can imagine if I create a new achievement class, let's do something like, at Laracasts, you get a badge if you have a lifetime account. So let's call this Lifer. If I want, I can extend achievement type directly from within here. And now you can see as part of that, it also includes the method stubs that I will need to fill out. And that's pretty cool. So return earned if you are a lifetime subscriber. And then finally, the qualifier would be something like, I don't have this method in our example project, but something like this. Some kind of check that determines if the user is on the lifetime plan. And yeah, notice how much easier this is to prepare versus what we had at the beginning of the video, where every single achievement type was basically following the exact same pattern for what a name is, for what the level is, for what the icon is. Now, I only have to override those default implementations or those parent implementations when and if I need to. So for example, assuming first 1,000 is much more difficult to acquire, which it's not. But if it was, in that case, I can override that method. And again, I can just manually do it, or with PHPStorm, I can press Command-N, and I'm going to override a parent method, and I'll just start typing. In this case, the method is level. And I see it right there. All right. And now, yeah, I can return a constant or the string, whatever you want, whatever makes sense. And I've now overwritten that default implementation. So let's finish up by making advanced a constant as well, and then we will be done. Control T, introduce constant called advanced. I will move it to another class though. All right, the target class will be our parent, like so. And again, I can use self. Okay, so now we have two constants, one for beginner and one for advanced, and then our base implementations. I think this is good. All right, so I think you now have a general understanding of PHPStorm's refactoring capabilities. So with that in mind, let's move on to a new section in the next lesson. Okay. Hi, everybody. So to start off this new section, I have compiled a list of 5 Laravel Idea specific features that I think you need to know about. So why don't we just jump in? And I have my notes here so I don't forget. All right, let's go. Number 1. From time to time, you will want to visit the Laravel menu and choose Generate Helper Code. All right, so what this is going to do is generate background code that makes some of Laravel's more magical features understandable to PHPStorm. And here's what I mean. Let's go into our routes file. And maybe right here, we want to return some JSON that represents all posts that were created by a specific user. So you might do something like this. User, just grab the first one, and then give me the post relationship. But right off the bat, we have a little squiggly line here, and we have property accessed via magic method. Okay, so instantly it's letting us know there's something going on here. Let's have a look. I will command click on user, and if we scroll down, yeah, there is no post relationship. So let's do that now. And as you learned many episodes ago, if a user has many posts, I could just type has many, and you'll see there's an option to autocomplete that specific relationship. Okay, cool. So let's hit Command open brace to go back, and it still doesn't work, does it? And that would make sense. You'll see it can find the user record, and we could call a post method on it. But as we know with Eloquent, we can also call posts as a magic property that will fetch me the corresponding collection of posts. And right now, PHPStorm doesn't know anything about that. Okay, so let's give it a shot. Right now, we have a squiggly line. But if I come up to Laravel and choose Generate Helper Code, notice it disappears. And further, if I command click, it is now smart enough to take us to the appropriate relationship, even though we're technically accessing it as a magic property. So now, yeah, I want you to take that little convenience and then multiply it across the entire code base. And that is what generating helper code does for you. All right, number 1, let's move on to number 2. And I call this one auto completion anywhere. I'll show you an example. Let's return to the routes file, and we will give a name to this route. It's the home page, so we often give this a name of home, right? Okay, well now, because we've assigned a route name here, we can reference that name from anywhere in the application. We'll just do it down here for convenience. Give me a route, and then I'll hit Control Space for my auto-completion, and sure enough, home pops up. And yeah, this is going to be referenced anywhere. So maybe within a controller, I could redirect to a route, and once again, Control Space, and it'll provide instant auto-completion for my Laravel routes. So cool. Next, we have the same luxury when generating our Eloquent queries. So for example, I could say user where, and once again, notice if I Control Space here, it's going to show me all of the fields specifically for my user model. So maybe if I want to find a user according to their email address, I could do that here. And then the value, of course, would probably come from the request or a form. I'll just hard code it. And we again have auto-completion. Why don't we go with first or fail? All right, and we'll save that to user. All right, next, this isn't uniquely related to the plugin, but it's a good one to know. This namespace is getting a little long for my taste, so I will select it. I will hit Option Return and choose Simplify Fully Qualified Class Name. And now it imports it and replaces it with just the name only. And I think that looks a lot better. All right, let's keep going. Let's go back to user. And maybe we've decided that we track down a user by their email address often enough to the point that it should either be a query scope or even a static method. Why don't we do a scope? So I could call this scope and maybe by email, or how about with email? This will accept the query as well as the corresponding value. So then I could say query where, and once again, I have auto completion, and then I can pass through the value. All right, let's try to use it. Now, if I come back to my routes file, and now let's replace all of this with our query scope with email, but I don't have auto completion. And that makes sense. We haven't regenerated the helper code. So that's why I said you want to get in the habit of doing this, or you can do it automatically. Generate helper code. And now if we try it again, notice the editor is smart enough to track it down with email, foo@example.com, and it'll just work. All right, now let's do a couple more and then we'll move on to item number 3. We also have auto completion for things like configuration values. So let's say I want to grab, I don't know, config, services, and maybe the mailgun endpoint. Maybe we need to track that down. Okay, let's see if we can do it. So if I type config services, once again, we have instant auto completion. And I can see right here, this is the one I need. Or because I know it's called endpoint, I could even skip the file name and just type endpoint, and this will return all matching keys. So in our case, it happens to be the one at the top, and we're all set. This one is especially useful, I think. All right, let's do one more before moving on to number 3. Maybe I want to listen for a post request to /posts, and this will insert a new post into the database. But of course, first, I must validate the request. So maybe a title is required. And again, notice if I control space, it will autocomplete all validation rules. So if I write required, there we go. And yeah, this is going to work with the pipe syntax. So maybe there's a minimum number of characters of 10, whatever makes sense. Or it will also work with the array syntax. So again, if I type required, it just works. All right, so let's be done with that, even though, again, auto-completion works in countless areas across your entire code base. And the cool thing is, you don't even need to know that the plugin is providing it to you. It'll just work the way you would expect it to work, which is very cool. All right, moving on. Number 3. And this one is called, let's see, generate anything anywhere. Okay, so this is a recap. We already talked about it a number of episodes ago, but I'm covering it 2 times because it's so incredibly helpful. So again, if I come up to Laravel, we have code generation at the top, or you can review a full list of all of the generators here. So I could generate an event or a listener or a job or a mailable or a middleware or a policy. I'm not doing the whole list, but you get the idea. Pretty much anything in a Laravel app that you need to generate is available, including things like tests. Give me a unit test or a feature test. All of that is available. So yeah, if I want a feature test, I could choose it here. Or again, in my own workflow, I wouldn't do this. I would use the shortcut, which is Shift Command, comma. And then again, I'm not going to fully write it out, create feature test. I would just write test, and it'll track it down. All right, so this is a test while we're working with posts. Why don't we say fetch all posts or something like that, and it will instantly generate a pest-specific feature test for me. Now, a little note here. Maybe if we do it again, feature test, maybe you want your test nested within a parent directory. So in the last episode, we were talking about achievements. So if I want this test nested within a parent directory, I just include the directory name as part of it. So maybe something like award achievement test, give that a run. And now once again, you can see it is in feature achievements, award achievement test. And that's what I want. But on top of that, don't forget, once again, Shift Command, comma, if I generate a model specifically, and this does something a little different, it has a fancy little generator panel where I can, yes, create the model, but also assign the fields as part of it, and then also specify if I want a migration or a factory or a form request or a policy included as part of it. So it's pretty neat. Maybe I have a model called activity that consists of the user who created it, tab, space, and then maybe, I don't know, the body that represents the activity. Maybe this could be JSON, maybe it's simply text. All right, So let's add a migration and a factory and a corresponding controller, and we'll click go. And there we go. It populated the migration. It gave us our model. I can select here to choose the related files. In this case, you can see the corresponding factory that it also created. And then once again, it created corresponding fake data to go along with it. So neat. All right, number 4. And I've already forgotten it. What is it? Number 4. Blade components. Yeah, this is pretty neat. Check this out. If we're sticking with posts, and I'm going to hide the sidebar here, I will hit Shift Command comma to generate a blade component. And what should we call this? Maybe blog post? And let's give that a run. Okay, so now we have a starter component that will be located in Views, Components, Blog Post. So yeah, here, maybe this would be an article where you would have a corresponding post or something like that. Hard-coded post title. You get the idea. Okay, now let's reference this from one of our views. So I will go into my routes file, and yeah, maybe let's get rid of all of this. Why don't we go with route view in this case? So if the user visits /posts, I will load the view in the post folder called index. But yeah, notice I didn't get auto completion because this view doesn't yet exist. However, I could hit Option Return and now create the view. And yeah, it's just magical. It'll work exactly the way you expect, and it knows to place the view within the post directory. Okay, so right here, I'm just going to use a full layout, and then I want to reference our new blade component. So notice if I start typing the tag for our component, again, we have auto completion here, which is pretty cool. Okay, but now, of course, we might need to pass the title to this component. So I will command click to instantly visit that component, which is cool. And yeah, here we will replace this with the title. All right, let's declare at the top that we have props, and again, we have auto completion here for the title. Okay, let's switch back and try to pass it through. So once again, X blog post, and notice if I start typing, again, we have blade component prop auto completion. Pretty neat. And yeah, this would be something like that, or I'll just use a string. Pretty cool. Now, on that note though, before we move on to the next item, let's say that you haven't yet created the blade component, and instead you have it nested maybe within a for each loop or something like that. Okay, well, what you could do is select the corresponding HTML, and then open the refactoring menu with Control-T, and yeah, notice there's an option to extract a blade component. So exact same process. It extracts the file into the components directory, and we get the exact same thing. Very cool. Okay, so number 5, and this will be our last one. We have auto-completion for fillable fields. So let's go into my post model. And yeah, if I want to be explicit about my fillable fields, I could start typing protected fillable, but again, just PHPStorm in general doesn't require this. I can instead start typing the property name, and it'll figure out that, oh, this is probably what you're looking for. So yeah, that will save a lot of typing. Okay, so now what are the fillable fields? And yeah, traditionally, if you're using Sublime Text or something like that, you can often forget. So you'll have to go back to either your database table or your migration to figure out, yeah, what did I have here? A title, a body, and a user ID. Okay, well, notice though, if I hit Control Space, it will give me auto-completion, again, for those attributes. So yeah, we could go with body and whatever else might be appropriate there. Pretty neat. And yeah, the same is going to be true if I select the class name and hit Command-N. What if we generate, how about a JSON resource for a post? Notice, again, it will auto-complete the corresponding attributes. And then I can reformat, tweak it however I need to, and I'm off to the races. And yeah, trust me, what's going to happen is you will take this for granted very quickly, and you'll forget that before PHPStorm and before the plugin, you were manually writing out this code for every single resource in your application, for every single fillable field, for every single config item or route name. So trust me, your fingers are going to be thankful for this plugin. Okay, so I think that's it. Why don't we move on in the next episode to something else? All right, next up, we should have a look at multiple cursors. I'll show you how to use them. So why don't we open any class here? How about user? And let's see. Yeah, this isn't quite right, but it'll work for an example. Let's say that these two properties here and here need to have their visibility swapped out for public. Okay, well, of course, a number of episodes ago, you learned that I could press Option Return and then come down to public like so. And then I could do the exact same thing here. And that's great, and that's probably what you do. However, another option is to manually perform this change using multiple cursors. And here's what I do. Once again, I would put the cursor on top of this keyword, and I would press Control-G. Okay, so that selects the word, but then when I press Control-G again, it's going to find the next occurrence of that word and add a new caret. So now you'll see I actually have two carets here. And if I start typing, I am typing in two different places. So yeah, once again, I could start typing public, and now I've made that switch, again, using multiple cursors. All right, let's try it again. Let's come up here. Oh, we missed one. All right, so let's select it, Control-G, G, G, and I can change it to public. And yeah, I think you'll find in plenty of situations, this ends up being the faster approach, especially for small little tweaks. So once again, I will press Command-Z to undo that. And yeah, here's another example. How about right here? We'll have a function, full name, returns a string. And yeah, right here, let's initialize a variable name. This will be John. And then I just want to have repeated references to this variable. So maybe I will concatenate his last name, and then we return it. Okay, so imagine that as part of a refactor, you want to change this variable name to full name. Well, once again, we could use the refactoring menu. Control-T, rename, full name, and we're done. And yeah, this is an incredibly fast and safe and secure way to go about it. But also, if it better fits your workflow, you could just use multiple cursors. So I will hit Command-Z to undo. And yeah, I will put the caret on top of the variable name. I will hold down Control, and then I will press G, 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 and I can update it in this way. And yeah, that works too. So the only reason why I say the former approach with the refactoring menu is a little safer is because, well, when you go that route, you are selecting every reference to that variable name. Whereas when we manually do it, yeah, there's an opportunity that you will miss one and you might introduce a bug. But yeah, again, for little things like this, just pick one that fits your workflow. They're both great. Okay, cool. So here's another example. Let's go into a view. How about, let's see, post, index. What do we have here? Let's create something. I'm going to use Emmet to quickly scaffold some HTML. So how about we have a UL with a nested list item, and specifically I want 5 of those, and I will press Tab to autocomplete that structure. Okay, so as you see here, we actually have tab stops. So I could do 1, return, 2, return, 3, 4, 5, and that works great as well. But imagine that we didn't already have tab stops and we were just visiting this HTML for the first time. Well, if I wanted to quickly populate these list items with some kind of dummy text, again, I could do something like this, where you select it, and then you grab the mouse and you do it like this, and that's fine. But again, a more seamless approach is to reach for multiple cursors in this case. So what I would probably do is select this opening list item and then press Control-G a handful of times. And now I have 5 cursors, at which point I can populate this. And yeah, you'll even reach for this in HTML when applying attribute values. For example, maybe we've decided that all of these list items need a class. Well, once again, exact same approach. Select them all. And then right here, I can say class, text, red, or again, whatever is appropriate. It's a pretty quick way to go. All right, let's finish up by having a look at the key map. So again, Command, comma to open up settings. I will choose key map. And yeah, if you don't know what the name of the menu action is, but you do know the keyboard shortcut, then select here and type it in. So if I press Control-G, sure enough, that is bound to add selection for next occurrence. That's the menu item we've been doing, and it's under Edit and Find. Here's another one. Control-Command-G on the Mac, and notice this will select all occurrences at once. So whereas our initial approach was manually adding cursors one at a time, this will find all matches and create additional cursors. So let's have a look at that now. I'm going to put the caret right here, Control-Command-G, and it's going to find all matches for that current word and create cursors for them. So again, even if there was one up here, like this, and we're way down here, Control-Command-G, and now we have, what is that, 6 cursors, and we can make whatever change is appropriate. And yeah, mostly that's it. And really, yeah, multiple cursors have been around across a wide range of code editors for a long time at this point. And you're probably already using them, and you'll be happy to hear that in PHPStorm, there's full support. But yeah, if this is brand new to you, don't skip out on this one. This is an incredibly useful feature. All right, let's keep going. So next up, why don't we take just a few minutes, it's all we need, to discuss live templates or effectively code snippets. All right, here we go. So I'm going to open up my routes file, and yeah, let's register a new route that loads a view. And how about if you visit the home page, we load the view called welcome. And notice as I start typing, because we're using the Laravel Idea plugin, we have auto-completion for our views, which is really cool. All right, so now I can command-click to go directly to that view. And yeah, at the very top, this is the default welcome page that you get with Laravel. And actually, let's have a look in the browser real quick. And yep, here we go. You've probably seen it 100 times. Okay, so anyways, if I switch back, you can see that the Laravel team is inlining the Tailwind CSS library. But yeah, one thing I often find myself doing, especially for demos at Laracasts, is importing a CDN version of Tailwind. And I always seem to forget what the URL is. So as it turns out, that URL is actually through a script, and we can do secure cdn.tailwindcss.com. And yeah, if I switch back, there might be a couple tweaks. Yeah, it looks like a font isn't being referenced properly, but for all intents and purposes, we are now loading Tailwind, which is cool. But if I switch back, I'm always forgetting what this source path is. So this is a prime candidate for a live template, and I'll show you how to do it. First up, I'm going to select the whole thing, and then I will hit Command comma to open up my settings, and I'm just going to look for live template. All right, here we go. And yeah, of course, out of the box, we have a bunch that we can reach for. Things like give me the fully qualified class name for a file, or if I want to echo something, or create a public method. And we've already used this many times. So for example, before I continue, if I want to use this snippet or this live template, the abbreviation is pubf. So if I were to quickly open up a file, and if I type pubf, there we go. I hit return and it works. Now, another option is to use a keyboard shortcut so that I can filter down all of the live templates that I have. And that action, I believe, is called insert live template. Yeah, and you can see on my machine that is bound to Command J. So if we give that a shot, this will show me all of the snippets that are relevant for the current file. So again, if I want the fully qualified class name, notice it's dynamic in this case, so it knew I was in a user class, so it referenced the appropriate path, which is cool. But yeah, in our case, I could hit Command J, pub F, and there we go. Anyways, back on track, Command comma, and yeah, within the PHP section, because we do have a blade file here, why don't we add a new template? All right, what should the abbreviation be? Whatever you want, Tailwind, CDN, anything like that. And I'm going to paste in that script reference. Now, if I were to simply apply this and not declare a context, let's see how this works. All right, let's go back to welcome. I'll get rid of this and hit Command J. And now if I start typing Tailwind, I don't see it at all. And further, if I do the full snippet and I try to use tab completion like this, it doesn't work. And that's because I did not set a context. So I can do that right down here. Let's define, where is this snippet relevant? Well, I could say it's relevant within PHP and HTML. All right, let's hit apply and try it one more time. Command J, Tailwind, and now it shows up. Very easy. But now, what about tab stops and things like that? Well, let's do another example. Let's see. This is a fresh install of Laravel, but you can see that I've already pulled in Pest behind the scenes. So why don't let's go into the features section. we have some dummy tests here. And yeah, here we have one. It returns a successful response. It might be nice if I had a snippet to quickly scaffold this basic structure here. So maybe I could have a live template called it. All right, let's give it a shot. I'm going to copy all of this, go back, and let's create a brand new one here. All right. The abbreviation is it. I will paste all of this in, but of course, this should be dynamic, and then the body should be dynamic. Okay, so I'm going to leave it like that for just a minute. I will declare a context, and let's see how this works. I will now type it. It comes at the top. I hit return. And this looks good, but now look where the cursor is. It's right at the bottom, which again just takes me out of the flow a little bit. Really, I want the cursor to stop here and then maybe have a second tab stop that goes to the body of the closure here. All right, so once again, Command, comma, and yeah, let's see what we can do here. If we review any of these others, yeah, how about this one? Notice that I can declare dynamic tab stops that are named by using this syntax here. $, and then a name, and then a closing $. Okay, so here I could say, well, this represents the name of the test, and then here is where I will end. All right, so once again, apply, try it again, it, and notice where the cursor is now. So I can do something, hit tab, and now it takes me to the next tab stop, and I can begin my test here. Very cool. All right, one more. How about this? One thing I often do with pest is I will declare tests that I need to do, almost like I'm gathering my thoughts. So for example, I might say it can fetch all recent posts or something like that. And if I'm not ready to work on this, I will add a call to do. And yeah, that ends up being really cool because, again, it's a helpful way to gather my thoughts. So why don't we turn this into a snippet as well called to do. All right, once again, Command, comma, or this time I will select everything. I will bring up my control bar with Command P or Shift Shift. And why don't we just look for live template and see what actions are available to me? In our case, we want something like extract or save as live template. So let's choose that one. And yeah, notice it will create a brand new template under a user category. And that's great, especially if you want to export them for others. Okay, either option works. So the abbreviation in this case is to do. Now the stop point will be here. And once again, I will call it the name of the test. And also, by the way, notice this. When we used that action, save as live template, it's smart enough to recognize that we were within a PHP file when we called that action. So it automatically applies the context, which is cool. Okay, so now once again, I can simply type to do to gather my thoughts, tab, here's another one, and brainstorm. It ends up being a nice workflow. And yeah, really, that's going to take you 95% of the way there. In situations where you have more complicated snippets, just keep in mind that there are dynamic variables that you can reference. So in this case, because I have a name variable within my template here, I can actually bind that, so to speak, to an expression. So for example, if I want to capitalize something or reference a part of the file, like the name of the file or the name of the class or the current date, you can do some pretty funky and wild things here using these expressions. And yeah, I would encourage you to have a look here when you get to that point. But otherwise, most of the time, you just won't need it. And this will take you, again, 99% of the way there, which is cool. All right, so yeah, that is live templates. In the next episode, we'll move on to something else. All right, our next order of business is Tailwind CSS, an incredibly super popular utility-first CSS framework. So yeah, let's see if we can figure out a nice way to integrate it into our editor workflow. Let's get going. So I will hit Command, comma to open up my settings area, and within plugins, let's go to Marketplace, and I'm going to look for Tailwind. And yeah, this third one is the one we want. And you can see it's actually bundled and ready to go. But yeah, if for whatever reason on your machine it's disabled, just make sure you click Enable and then Apply, and you're good to go. Next, we will also use Prettier. So Prettier, if I click over here, is an opinionated code formatting assistant. And in particular, we're going to combine this with a specific Tailwind plugin to allow for automatic utility class sorting, which is really cool. All right, so once again, Prettier is bundled as well, as you see here. But yeah, once again, if it's disabled for whatever reason, go ahead and enable it, and you're ready to go. All right, so the next step, if I want to demonstrate some of this automatic sorting, we of course first have to install Tailwind into our project. And don't worry, it'll only take a minute. So if we switch back to the Tailwind website and go to Get Started, right down here, why don't we use a framework guide for Laravel, and we're going to use Vite. All right, so we already have a project. The next step is to install Tailwind and PostCSS and Auto-Prefixer, and then initialize Tailwind. Okay, so I'm copying that, and let's switch to my terminal, and I can paste this in. And while that's doing its thing, the next step is to update this new Tailwind configuration file with all of our relevant file paths, like your Blade files, or your JavaScript files, or your Vue files. So once again, I can copy this and switch to my editor, and we should have a new tailwind.configuration file, and I'm going to paste all of that in here. All right, the next step, add the Tailwind directive to your CSS, and we're going to put that within app.css. And that comes with Laravel out of the box. So I will look for this file, and I'm going to paste that in. Number 5, start your build process. So let's do that from the terminal. All right, and there we go. We have our watcher up and running. So finally, start using Tailwind in your project, and we can use the Vite directive to reference our entry point CSS file. And at this point, everything should work. So let's go back, and why don't we visit our welcome file, and I'm going to replace that whole splash page with some example or demo HTML here, and then we'll have a look in the browser. And it seems to be up and running. Notice that we have bold text that is underlined and quite large, and that does line up here. So if we were to append to this, maybe make the text red, this should auto-update behind the scenes, and we are up and running. This is great. All right, so the next step is to pull in a Tailwind Prettier plugin that can be responsible for automatically sorting these CSS classes. So I will add some dummy classes here to demonstrate the sorting. And I want you to notice as I write this out, we get instant autocompletion or IntelliSense, again, because we have that Tailwind plugin available to us. Cool. So let's grab that, and then maybe, I don't know, at the front, we will have Flex and Justify Center. Again, these are dummy classes just to demonstrate the automatic sorting. Okay, so let's give this a shot. If I come back to Chrome, here's the GitHub page for the Tailwind Prettier plugin, and this is a first-party plugin. Okay, so let's scroll down, and it looks like we need to install both Prettier and the Prettier plugin. So I will copy that, close this out with Control-C, and paste it in. Or don't forget that PHPStorm has a built-in terminal that you can reach for instead. All right, next, I'm going to create a Prettier RC file within my project root. So we'll call it .prettierrc.json. And we can set this to an empty object. I think that should be enough. So the way it works with Prettier is if you pull in a third-party Prettier plugin, and as long as that plugin follows a specific naming convention, you don't need to do anything. It can be required automatically, which is pretty cool. So let's close this, and let's test it out. Imagine maybe you're building a Vue app. It's very popular in the Laravel community. Maybe you have a components directory, and within this components directory, I will add a test.vue component. All right, so for the template, why don't we just grab this H1 that we worked on earlier? And actually, while I'm doing this, keep in mind that out of the box, Prettier doesn't play too nicely with PHP files. There are third-party plugins and tools that you might try, but in general, with a base install of Prettier, it doesn't know how to work with PHP. Okay, great. So now I have a Vue component with some randomly sorted Tailwind CSS classes. And it doesn't matter what the order is. After I run Prettier, it will automatically sort them in an appropriate order. Now, keep in mind, you can't configure this order. It's what you get is what you get, right? And that's sort of the spirit behind it. You don't need to think about the sorting too much. Just let them do it. All right, let's give it a shot. This time I will open up the terminal directly within PHPStorm, so I can double click Command, come down to Terminal, and let's give it a shot. node modules bin. This is where Prettier was installed, and we will run this on resources, JS, components, test.view, and give that a run. Okay, so now notice it doesn't instantly update the file. With this command, it just shows us what it would look like if we did perform that right. So yeah, notice before we had font bold at the beginning, but after font bold was moved to position 4. And yeah, the same thing over here. We had underline and then the color, but after we had the color and then underline. And yeah, there's a whole sorting algorithm they use. Again, you don't need to worry about it too much. All right, so let's run the command again, but this time I will add the right flag, and this will then update the corresponding file. Okay, but yeah, of course, we don't want to do that from the terminal every single time. I just want it to be part of my workflow. So that's the next step. Command comma to bring back settings. And yeah, it looks like I already have it up, but if I search for Prettier, I can see this panel here. All right, and notice right here, we have a glob of all of the file types or the file extensions that we want Prettier to run off of. So yeah, take note of this and maybe configure it to your needs. In my case, JavaScript files, TypeScript, and Vue is good enough for me. All right, next, the Prettier package itself. Yeah, make sure this points to your local installation. It's possible it might be pointing to a global installation that is outdated and could lead to some kind of error or something. So make sure it's pointing to the most recently locally installed version of Prettier. And next, we're going to trigger it on save. And yeah, if we click through to our save actions, you'll remember that a number of episodes ago, we enabled a file watcher that says when we save the file, we should trigger Pint. Well, now we're doing Prettier as part of that. Cool, so let's apply it. And if we did everything correctly, I think this should just work. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo to bring back our initial sorting. And yeah, now if I make any kind of change, universe, and I hit save, 1, 2, 3, there we go. It works. And now we have automatic Tailwind class sorting, which trust me is very, very cool. I run a medium-sized project, Laracasts, that has probably thousands of utility classes. And every time I save one of those files, all of them are instantly sorted. I love it. All right, next up, check this out. This is really cool. So as you know, AI is all the rage right now, and there's a really popular tool from GitHub called Copilot. It uses OpenAI to suggest code and entire functions in real time right from your editor. And as it turns out, we can also use it within JetBrains projects. All right, let's give it a shot. So back to PHPStorm, Command comma, let's go into plugins, into the marketplace, and I will search for Copilot. All right, this is the one. All right, it looks like we need to restart. All right, I think that should do the trick. Now, on your machine, you might get a prompt to first to log in and authenticate with GitHub. If so, follow those steps, and then you'll be all set to go. And now you have intelligent auto-completion courtesy of the OpenAI codex. All right, so yeah, and immediately you get an idea of what you might want. But alternatively, you can do things like this. You write a comment that declares what you want to do. So a user has many conversations. And if we do this, sure enough, we are getting auto-completion or suggestion, and this is coming again from OpenAI, and I can tab complete. Now in this case, just keep in mind, because we're using the Laravel Idea plugin, we could also just start typing has many, and we can use these shortcuts here, has many activities or posts or comments, and that will populate it for us. Okay, let's do another one. Let's do some kind of test. And maybe I want to grab the, I don't know, or I want to shave off the last 2 characters of a string. So maybe our string is foobar, and you need to get rid of AR. And you know, it's funny, it's a very simple task, of course, but yeah, sometimes, especially when you use lots of languages, you forget how to do it. So why don't we let OpenAI help with us? Shave the last 2 characters off of string. And notice, come on, that's really cool. Amazing stuff. All right, what else could we do? We could have it write some tests for us. So let's go into the test directory, and let's see what we have here. We have an example test that uses pest PHP. stay tuned for this. We're actually going to talk more about pest in the next episode. But yeah, maybe we could write tests for a post controller. So check this out. I could say pest feature test for a post controller, and we could let it do the job. All right. So it can create a post. Let's do another one. It can list posts. Let's do another one. It can show posts. And yeah, that alone is pretty ridiculous. But just keep in mind, even though it feels magical, and real quick, I will hit Option Return to import this. Even though it feels magical, it's still just predicting what the likely next character or string of characters should be. And often it won't quite be what you want. So for example, let's see, it can show a post. All right, whip up a post in the database. It's smart enough to know likely what the endpoint is to view a specific post. And then it asserts a 200 status. And then it also asserts that the post attributes, all of them, will be included as part of the JSON, which may or may not be what you want. But yeah, at the very least, it'll get you started, or it might give you some ideas of where you want to go. Now, another option is to let it incrementally assist you. So I could say, okay, it shows a post. All right, and now I will begin to type, and notice as I do so, it provides suggestions for me, and I swear 9 times out of 10, it is spot on. So in this case, well, given that I have a post, when I visit a page, and again, it's smarter than I can speak. If I visit the endpoint, then, well, I expect a 200 status code. What else? I expect to see the post title on the page. And yeah, it's funny. It's not 100%, but it's pretty close to what I would have written, which is neat. All right, let's do another one. It persists a new post in the DB. Okay, so notice here I'm not getting any suggestion. It will provide suggestions as I start typing, but otherwise, if you want to manually trigger it, on the Mac, you can press Option \. There we go. So let's see what it comes up with. In this case, it creates a post, but it doesn't persist it. It calls the make method instead. So now we have a post model that is not saved to the database. And then it makes a post request to this endpoint. It passes through the attributes. And yeah, in response, we expect a 302 redirect. And then we also expect that this new post has been persisted within the post table. And yeah, again, it's 95% of the way there. It's amazing how accurate it can be. But yeah, it is true. Sometimes, though, when you're working, it just gets annoying. So in those cases, I would turn it off by going up to Tools, GitHub Copilot, and yeah, you can disable completions temporarily and then turn them back on when you want to. Or you can turn them off only for PHP, but keep them included for things like JavaScript or HTML. It's entirely up to you. But yeah, at this point, I gotta say, unless you have maybe a personal objection to AI, which who knows, you might be right. So we'll see how that turns out. But otherwise, yeah, I think at this point, it is a required plugin. It is so useful, and it saves me a ridiculous amount of time. Give it a shot. Next, let's figure out what our testing workflow might look like within PHPStorm. All right, so for this lesson, I will once again be working in the Laracasts codebase, and specifically, we will focus on these 2 files. So one is a chat eloquent model that tracks a chat with what we call Larry, but what is actually the OpenAI API, so we can send messages back and forth with OpenAI. And then I have a corresponding chat test that you can see here. And yeah, you'll notice I'm using pest PHP here, which I really like. All right, so as we go over this, don't worry about the inner code here. It doesn't matter. It's not really relevant to this lesson. But yeah, really quickly to give you an idea, well, it starts a new chat with OpenAI. All right, well, here's my API. I have this model called chat. I call a method say, and then I send through a message, and then I perform my assertions. Well, when we do that, I expect there to be a response. And you'll see up here, I'm actually faking that response so that I'm not continuously pinging the OpenAI API. And then I assert that those messages are thrown into the database. All right, you get the idea. So why don't we go ahead and run all of the tests within this file. And once again, I will open up the terminal here. We'll say pest on the test unit chat test file, and we'll give that just a minute. And actually, I can hit Shift Command quote on the Mac to expand this. And it looks like everything's passing except 1. And clearly, that's the one we're going to work on in this lesson. All right, so let's have a look. It archives messages that are a month old, failed asserting that 3 is identical to 2. All right, so let's have a look. Right down here. Yeah, this is the one. Okay, let's have a look. It archives messages that are a month old, and it looks like we whip up 3 dummy messages in the database. And notice that, well, this one was created now, this one was created a week ago, and this one was created over a month ago. Okay, so at that point, of course, there should be 3 messages in my database table. But then I have this method called purge, and when we call that method, well, as a result, the chat messages should be reduced to 2, and this especially old one that's older than a month should have been erased. So if we try to track that down, yeah, we're going to get null. It doesn't exist anymore. Okay, so let's try this. Well, first, if I only want to execute a single test, I can add a call to this only method. And then once again, if I bring back the terminal and we run that test again, you'll see that it ignores all the other tests in the file except for that one. Yep, we only ran a single test. All right, so that's useful, but PHPStorm can help us out a good deal here. So I'm going to close out the terminal, and instead, well, first, I'm not using PHP unit, I'm using pest. So why don't we pull in a dedicated plugin for pest? So once again, Command comma to open up my settings. We'll go into plugins, into the marketplace, and I will search for pest. All right, and it looks like this is the one here. So let's install it and restart. All right, and I immediately see some changes here. So first up, there's a play icon next to every test. So of course, that allows me to trigger or play that single test. And then also we have some squigglies here that provide suggestions. So notice right here, multiple XSpecs can be converted into chainable calls. So just like anything else, I can hit Option Return and have a look at what that looks like. All right. And yeah, if you want, you can bring this down, save it again, and yeah, maybe you prefer that. I expect chat messages to have a count of 2, and then I also expect this query to be null. Yes, sometimes I will chain it, and then other times maybe I find it a touch confusing, and I will stick with what I had initially. And yeah, if you don't like that suggestion at all, once again, you can disable it by hitting Option Return, and then right down here, come down to Disable Inspection, and then it won't annoy you anymore. All right, very cool. All right, so let's see what happens if I try to run this test. I click play, run. All right, it's giving it a run, and let's see how it does. Yeah, of course it fails. We'd expect that. But now we're triggering the test from directly within PHPStorm, which means I can get rid of this only call here. All right, so now whenever I'm working on a test, I can click on the play icon and actually notice because the test failed, we also have a little more feedback about the failure. Okay, so I can run it again, or notice on my Mac, it's currently bound to Control-Shift-R. So I can put the cursor anywhere within this test body and hit Control-Shift-R, and now we're running the test. Okay, cool. So of course, the next step at this point is, well, let's make the test pass. So to do that, I'm going to switch over to my chat model. And it looks like I already have this method set up, so I can Command-click to go directly to that implementation. And yeah, notice it doesn't do anything, so of course the test is failing. All right, so yeah, here's something you will often run into. As you are working on the implementation, you will often want to go back and rerun the tests. But currently, it's a little annoying to, just as an example, do something like this, and then, well, let's go back to chat test and then hit the play icon or the keyboard shortcut again. So of course, there's a way to rerun the previous test. So let's do that now. Go back to purge. So let's hit Shift-Shift, or of course, we bound that to Command-P in this series. And I will tab over to Actions. And again, I'm not entirely sure what it's called. It's something related to rerunning our tests. And it looks like it's the one on top. All right, hit Return. And now from anywhere in the code base, I can rerun this single test. But we can even do better. So let's close this out, bring back settings, and I will look in my key map. And let's see if we can bind that. So again, something like rerun. And let's see, which one do we want? Well, this is going to rerun all tests that failed during the previous run. And maybe that's actually what you want. Okay, so let's give this a binding or a shortcut. And yeah, whatever you want, whatever system you use. So for example, I actually use Command-T for running my tests, and then Shift-Command-T for rerunning the last test. But yeah, just keep in mind, whatever you choose, there could be collisions here. So it looks like, well, Command-T by default goes to the corresponding test for a class. So again, just make up your mind. Do you want to keep that or choose a different system? I will keep it and then remove those default key bindings. Okay, and while we're here, why don't we also search for run? And let's see, there's a bunch here. Well, you know what? We already know what the current binding is, Control-Shift-R. So let's filter it that way. Yeah, and right here, let's add a shortcut. And like I said, I like Command-T, but make up your own mind. So we will apply that. And yeah, let's give it a shot. So we'll start from scratch. Imagine you're working on a test. Anywhere within the test, I can now hit Command-T to run my test. Okay, and of course, it's going to fail. Let's make it work now. Command-click on purge, and we will start on it, and we're going to do something that doesn't work. We're just going to create a variable that we never use. But now I want to rerun the tests, so I can hit Shift-Command-T. All right, and now it reruns the previously failed tests. And in this case, there's only one. Okay, cool. So now we can actually work on an actual implementation. And yeah, in the previous episode, we learned about leveraging OpenAI and GitHub Copilot. So within the context of a chat class that interacts with OpenAI, it only makes sense that we leverage GitHub Copilot and OpenAI. Okay, so let's just comment out what we want to do. And already it's giving me an idea. And yeah, it's kind of amazing. That's exactly what I want. It's ridiculous how good it is. Delete all, and let's just tweak it a little bit. Delete all chat messages that are at least 30 days old. All right, let's see what it comes up with. Chat message, yeah, that's the corresponding model I have. Where created at is effectively a month ago, call delete. All right, I think that'll fix it actually. So let's run it, Shift-Command-T, give that just a second, and yeah, we get green. Okay, but now we do have one little issue. We bound Shift-Command-T to rerun failed tests from the previous run. But yeah, what if I want to tweak a currently passing test? Something like this. Instead of sub-days, we swap that out with sub-month. Well, yeah, now if I run Shift-Command-T, it's not going to do anything because there is no previously failed test. So maybe that's not the right key binding. Let's tweak it. So let's look for it again. And yeah, we no longer want this, so I will get rid of Shift-Command-T. And yeah, I think actually this is the one we want, debugger rerun. So let's add a shortcut, apply it, and give it another shot. So we made our change to sub-month, Shift-Command-T, and now it reruns the previous tests. Perfect. Okay, cool. So now if I go back to my test, so as an exercise, let's tweak this to at least 1 week old. Okay, so now based on these factories we have here, when we run this purge method, it should delete these two, right? Okay, so that means we'd have a remainder of 1 in that table. All right, let's give it a shot. Command-T, and yeah, of course it fails. All right, let's now make it pass. Command-click, and yeah, now we're going to tweak it to now sub-week, Shift-Command-T to rerun the tests. Oh, and it still fails. You know what? This might be, yeah, let's do less than or equal. It might be a situation where because we're calling it so quickly, now sub-week within our test and our purge are identical. So yeah, let's do less than or equal. Rerun the tests. Okay, yeah, that was the issue. Not a big deal, and it still works. All right, and that does it. So yeah, mostly that's going to be your workflow when running your tests within PHPStorm. All right, everybody. I hate to say it, but like all good things, which is a little self-serving, but I really do hope in your mind this qualifies. Like all things, I will rephrase, this series too shall end. So maybe it's only appropriate that we wrap up with a review of debugging within PHPStorm and what that workflow looks like to connect to Xdebug, which, to be frank, at least for me, I've always found to be a little frustrating to set up in the past. So let's see how we do here. Now, of course, before we can connect to Xdebug, we first have to ensure that it's installed. So let's do this. Why don't you work along with me? Open up your terminal and run php-v. All right, so you can see on my machine, I have PHP 8.2.5, and this is the gold right here. If you have Xdebug installed, you'll see a little note here. And in my case, I have Xdebug 3 installed. So yeah, on your machine, if you also see Xdebug 3, you know what? You're all set to go, and you can even fast forward or scrub forward 3 or 4 minutes. But yeah, otherwise, if you see Xdebug 2, you're probably fine, but just go through the upgrade process to bump up to version 3. Otherwise, if you don't see any reference to Xdebug, we need to install it. And here's how. Browse to xdebug.org, then visit install. And yeah, like everything, this will depend on your OS. But yeah, if you use Linux or Mac or Windows, just follow the corresponding documentation. So it looks like in my case, I'm on a Mac, and we can install it through Homebrew. So if you don't have Brew installed, or you can do things like this, well, that would be the first step. So you can visit brew.sh and run through these steps. Next, make sure that you run xcode select install to make sure all of the command line tools are ready to go. And I will warn you that can sometimes take a bit of time. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so then with Homebrew installed, next pull in PHP through Homebrew, and that'll take the shape of something like this, brew install PHP. Once you've done that, yeah, then you can pull in Xdebug through PECL, which ships with PHP. And yeah, PECL stands for PHP Extended Community Library, I think, pretty close. So yeah, just run that and paste it in. Now, I'm guessing it'll fail. Yeah, on my machine, it fails because I've already run through these steps, and I do have the latest version at the time of this recording. But yeah, if, in your case, it'll take a couple minutes or so, and there might even be a few instructions that you need to follow. All right, so at that point, theoretically, it should work. And I say theoretically because sometimes you might have to, for example, if you use Laravel Valet, you might want to try running Valet restart. If no matter what you do, you can't see Xdebug showing up when you run PHP-v, yeah, at that point, just ask a question in the comments below, and the rest of us will do our best to help you. But yeah, hopefully that should do the trick. The next step is to visit PHPStorm, and let's go into Settings, up to PHP, and right here, I want you to ensure that the PHP language level and the CLI interpreter match what you use on the command line. So if I were to say, for example, which PHP, we want to make sure that those point to the exact same thing. Okay, next, we want to have a look at our php.ini file, and there's a couple ways to do this. First, within PHPStorm, I could click here, and it looks like I have a few installed, but yeah, this one at the top is the one I need. And notice, well, if I have Xdebug up and running, I'll see a little note right here. But otherwise, you can open the configuration file directly from PHPStorm, like so. And now if I close this out, yeah, this is my php.ini file. Okay, so yeah, as part of the Xdebug process, there are a couple things they will want you to add, and you'll see I added them at the bottom below. So yeah, if you want, I will make this available in one of the comments, and you can just paste it in. And then finally, you will want to make sure that these match your local settings. So here's how we do that. Once again, go back into your settings area, and we will go into PHP Debug. And actually, the PHPStorm team has some nice pre-configuration steps that you can follow. So yeah, if you want to get this working, install Xdebug. And then if you want, you can validate your debugger configuration, and I'll show you about that in just a minute. Then you will install a browser bookmarklet. Then you will listen for incoming connections. And then if you're still having trouble, they have a really good zero configuration tutorial here that you could follow. And yeah, if nothing is working, go through this entire article, and hopefully you'll see some tips there. Okay, so yeah, finally, notice the debug port 9003 is the default, and notice we have the same port here. So yeah, what you would do on your machine is just search for Xdebug within your php.ini file, because you might already have some reference to it. And if so, you can just update or merge it however you need to. Otherwise, append this at the bottom or the top, and that should be fine. Okay, so once again, let's go back into the debug section. And what is this? Validate debugger configuration on the web server. This is actually pretty useful. So if you want, you can paste the full output of the PHP info function or into this text area, and it will scan it and let you know if it seems to be in order. So why don't we do that? And there's a couple ways to do this, but if you want, you could just return PHP info, or you could run it in the command line and then copy that to your clipboard. All right, so let's go to laravel.test, give it a refresh, and yeah, I'm just going to copy this whole thing, press Command C, and then I will, here it is, I will paste it in here and validate. All right, and it's going to let you know if there's anything to worry about. And it seems like down here, this seems fine. Port 9003 is busy. But you know what? I think that's busy already with Xdebug. But yeah, we'll try it together. And if we have any issues, we can use a different port. Okay, but otherwise, I think all of this is good to go. All right, so next we want to install a browser bookmarklet. So basically what this is it's a little tool for your browser. And yeah, you can see right here, I already have that installed and I can click debug. But yeah, on your machine, just choose the one that matches your OS of choice. So I was using Chrome, so I pulled in Xdebug helper. But yeah, just install any of these, or you can do it manually if you want, but this is a simpler solution. So take the browser bookmarklet approach. All right, once you've done that, we are going to enable listening for debug connections. I can either click here, or I can do it within the Run tab or menu, right down here at the bottom. Start listening for PHP debug connections. All right, so yeah, if we did everything correctly, and I think we did, if we add just a little bit of luck, hopefully it should work. So here's what I'll do. I will set a breakpoint on this line, and I can do that by simply clicking off to the left. Then let's go back to the browser. Let's make sure that our debugger thing is enabled, and then I will refresh, and it instantly kicks me back here. Okay, so now it's possible on your machine, the first time you run it, you'll see a little pop-up about an incoming connection. And if so, it may say set your path mappings. Just click on the directory name, press OK, and then you will be directed here. Okay, so now I can see all information about the current request. What's in the cookie, what's in the environment, what the server variables are, what the stack looks like. And at this point, I could either continue the request or resume the program, or I could evaluate or inspect the current environment. So let's do this. Let's click play to continue all the way, and let's make a slight tweak here. So let's say we accept some kind of name from the request, something like this, and then we will spit out the typical hello world, but maybe we will tweak it where we have various greetings. So I could create an array called greetings. One would be hello, one would be what is up, and a third one could be hey there. And yeah, I just want to grab a random greeting from the array and then concatenate that with the user's name, just for a simple example. So I could do something like Laravel's array random greetings, and then a space, actually a comma, and then a space, and then finally the name. All right, so yeah, if we were to give this a run in the browser, let's set name to Frank. And sure enough, we get what is up, Frank. If we do it a few more times, it will cycle between those various greetings. Okay, so now clearly that's not the lesson here. The lesson is how to debug this if we need to. So why don't we set a breakpoint right here, come back, give it a refresh, and yeah, now I can see again the environment as it exists at this point. This breakpoint, you can literally think of it as a pause. We are going to pause the application and inspect it as it currently is. So notice down here, I don't see any reference to greeting because we actually paused at the beginning of the line, which means we haven't yet executed this declaration. But if we were to click here, step over, that means step over this line. There's another one called step into, and that would be like if the current line is a function. Well, do you want to step over that function or step into the body of that function? And if you're in the body of that function, do you then want to step over line by line or step out of the function to the parent? So yeah, you have a few options there, and these are the corresponding buttons for that. Now I will see a reference to greetings because it has been declared at this point. So yeah, anyways, if I were to continue this, it will complete the program and we can see the output here. All right, let's try one more time. So this time, let's step over and I will go into the console to inspect. Well, how's the name? It's Frank in this case. What about greetings? And notice we do have auto completion. I can look at an individual one there. I could update name on the fly. Why don't we do my own name here? And real quick, before I run this, notice we have a little inlay hint here where name was set to Frank. But yeah, if I want to test how it will behave if I set the name to a different string, at this point I can continue, and we should see some kind of greeting and then my own name in the browser. And sure enough, we do. So yeah, in your Laravel apps, or really any app, of course, you now have a third tool for debugging at your disposal. So maybe you use DD for simple things. Maybe you've installed Laravel Ray, which is great as well. But now you have a third option, which is Xdebug, and it's incredibly, incredibly powerful once you get it up and running. So give it a shot.